What does it mean to truly challenge yourself? To me, a true challenge is one that forces you to put everything that you have into it, and with hundreds of hours of commitment and dedication, eventually reaching your goal. Throughout my time here on YouTube, I've been climbing higher and higher through the ranks of FNAF challenges. So I decided that this time, I'd push myself more than I ever had before. When I first set my sights on truly challenging myself, the fastest way to do so would be to beat the hardest FNAF challenge in the entire world. Now, if you're only familiar with the original FNAF games, you may think this just means beating the 50-20 mode in Ultimate Custom Night, and that I'm honestly making too big of a deal out of this whole FNAF challenge thing. But the FNAF challenge rabbit hole goes far deeper than just the original 50-20 mode. A few years after the completion of 50-20 mode, a project known as the FNAF Max Mode list would surface, which was dedicated to ranking the hardest FNAF challenges based on the skill required to complete them. And when I first saw this list, 50-20 was not where I expected it to be. It wasn't number 1. In fact, it wasn't even in the top 10. 50-20 mode sat all the way down in 92nd place. When I first saw this, I was amazed that something as hard as 50-20 could be so low. If 50-20 was 92, what could possibly be number 1? Well, it was still Ultimate Custom Night, but remade in an entirely different way. The number 1 was a challenge by the name of Hopeless Pursuit. And if you think the original Ultimate Custom Night was chaotic, here is just 10 seconds of unedited Hopeless Pursuit gameplay.
Deposit 5 coins. Deposit 5. Thank you. Deposit 5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins.
The moment I saw this challenge for the first time and the prestige that came with it, I knew that one day I had to conquer it. But to even come close to Hopeless Pursuit, I had to first become familiar with Ultimate Custom Night and the various fan mods of it. You see, there's a lot of progression that you have to go through to even think about Hopeless Pursuit, since HP is a super buffed version of an already buffed version of 50-20 No Death Coin. If you're unfamiliar with how the base game of UCN works, don't worry. I'll give an overview of how the basics of UCN work before we progress up to UCN Deluxe and eventually Hopeless Pursuit. I'm going to try to keep this segment as short as possible, but just know UCN is a lot. To keep things a bit simpler, I am going to omit some information that won't be relevant for later challenges. But if you still want to know the exact technical explanations, I'll have some notes with Helpy here in the corner when I mention something that gives a full explanation on what it is, so feel free to pause and read those if you're confused. Ultimate Custom Night is by far the most gameplay focused of any of the FNAF games, choosing to lean more into the challenge aspect rather than the horror one. Also, unlike any of the other FNAF games, Ultimate Custom Night relies very heavily on keyboard usage. Through this keyboard, you control the doors, flashlight, cameras, the 5 different tools, and the desk fan. With so many controls to memorize and worry about, it's very easy to mess up some of your inputs if you're required to press a ton of keys in quick succession. Not only do you have a ton of keyboard controls to worry about, the camera system is now significantly more complex than any other game. In most FNAF games, you simply use the cameras to, watch the animatronics, and very rarely you can interact with the cameras through something like the music box in FNAF 2 or controlled shocks in Sister Location. But in Ultimate Custom Night, most of the cameras have interactable features on them, and there is 2 entirely new camera systems for the vents and the ducts. Now, with 50 animatronics that all have unique mechanics, insane keyboard torture, and a very complex camera system, how could you possibly keep track of everything that's going on? Well, in Ultimate Custom Night, it's actually not as complex as it seems. The final challenge in Ultimate Custom Night is obviously 50-20 mode, with all 50 animatronics set to their max AI value. But the nature of 50-20 mode is kind of misleading. You'd think that 50-20 would be a chaotic battle the whole way through, but actually, for the majority of it, it just looks like this. You see, for the majority of the animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night, they're completely countered by stalling mechanics, and the ones that aren't too much of a threat anyway. So once you can set up these stalling mechanics, the majority of the night is spent pretty much idle in the office. There are 2 main types of stalling that are present in UCN, cam stalling and office stalling. Cam stalling is when you leave your camera system set on a specific camera, which will then freeze whatever animatronic is in that camera until you click off of it. Office stalling affects many more animatronics, and is the reason that we can somehow idle in the office for so long without anyone jump scaring us. Office stalling simply means that animatronics cannot initiate jump scares or enter the office until we pull up the camera monitor. With these stalling mechanics, 50-20 mode went from seemingly impossible to very doable by the average player. The strategy would simply go like this. You'd start the night, place one audio lure and one vent snare, then start coin farming. Now, coin farming is very important for later strategies, so we will go into how that works now. Coin farming can be done in two different ways. You can either go around from camera to camera and collect the Phas coins that spawn on each camera, or you can continuously get rid of animatronics that give Phas coins when dealt with. The latter option is much better for 50-20 mode, as not only is it faster and more consistent, but it is also much safer. Now to do this, we pull up our cameras to spawn in Balloon Boy and JJ in the right vent, who have a 2 in 3 chance to spawn each on every single camera flip. Helpy has this same mechanic with a 1 in 2 chance, and clicking him will award 1 Phas coin. We can repeat this process while dealing with Nightmare Balloon Boy and Golden Freddy on every flip until we have 10 Phas coins. Then we buy the Death Coin to Death Coin Funtime Foxy. Normally, Funtime Foxy would force us to watch his show times whenever the hour changes. However, if we get rid of him now, we can switch to camera 2, and this is where the cam stalling is used the most. Usually, we'd have to buy plushies throughout the night to deal with the corresponding plushie animatronics. But if we stay selected on camera 2, the plushie animatronics cannot move. There's a little more to it than that, but essentially, once you Deathcoin Funtime Foxy, you can just run out the ventilation until it's about to go out, get rid of Freddy and close the front vent to quickly pull up the cameras and reset the ventilation. Then keep office stalling and repeat that cycle until the night is over. The key takeaways here are that in base 50-20, we only have to interact with the ducts and vents one time at the very beginning of the night, and about 90% of the night is just sitting idle in the office. This was the first step in my ladder to Hopeless Pursuit, and I won't lie, despite its low max mode list ranking, 50-20 gave me quite a bit of trouble. Wait, hold on, bro. What the fuck? What is that?
Wait,
This is And I think the main reason why has to do with the keyboard usage in every UCN based max mode. And I found that through every single max mode I've done that involves a keyboard, it's always my weak spot. And honestly, this makes sense. I had trained my aim with games like Five Nights at Candy's 3 way before I did 50-20. So even though I had done quote unquote harder challenges than 50-20, it was still able to capitalize on my weak spot. Eventually though, I was able to beat it on stream. Ultra free challenge, what can I say? But of course, this was only the first step in a very, very long journey. Now, we aren't going to move on to UCN Deluxe quite yet, as that's still a really big jump in skill. And vanilla UCN still has one more challenge that we have yet to complete. We may have beaten 50-20, but we did use the Death Coin to erase Funtime Foxy for most of the night, so the next logical step was to beat 50-20 without using the Death Coin. On paper, the difference between 50-20 and 50-20 no Death Coin shouldn't be that crazy. Functionally, you're only adding one more animatronic. However, it's very important to note that in UCN, animatronics are not weighted equally in difficulty. Honestly, you could take all of the duct characters, vent characters, and distraction characters, put them all together, and they still wouldn't be as difficult as just turning Toy Freddy or Funtime Foxy on. Think of it like this, rather than a linear difficulty curve that gradually increases at a steady rate as you add more animatronics, we instead have an exponential curve. Point being, the jump between 50-20 and 50-20 no Death Coin is arguably more than 0-20 and 45-20. So what makes 50-20 no Death Coin so much harder than 50-20? Well, we're no longer able to erase Funtime Foxy, so now we're forced to remain on his camera in Funtime Cove, which means that we can no longer cam stall any of the plushie animatronics, forcing us to play the game past the first 30 seconds. Overall though, 50-20 NDC was quite the jump from normal 50-20, and required a lot more action past the first bit of the night. I used a strategy that was a bit more consistent and relied a lot less on luck, but I still ended up with around 30 to 40 Toy Freddy deaths before I ended up beating it, again on stream.
GG, boys! Let's go.
And that's about as far as vanilla UCN takes us, without doing any high AIs or green running. However, once players had beaten 50-20 and 50-20 no Death Coin, some took it a step further and wanted to beat UCN the intended way, without using any exploits like cam stalling and office stalling from before. Shooter25 had beaten it this way by Death Coining Toy Freddy, and True Player had done it with no Death Coin at all. Though this may have been the intended way to play UCN, it had a glaring issue. It was extremely luck-based. So the UCN community at the time wanted to make UCN more fun and also play it in its intended way, while not having stupidly hard RNG. And with that, debatably the most influential mod in the FNAF community was created. And if you thought the original UCN was chaotic, just wait until you see Ultimate Custom Night Deluxe. Now, I'm sorry, that was a lot of setup in explaining vanilla UCN, but now we can focus on the main portion of this video with UCN Deluxe. UCN Deluxe is essentially a reimagining of UCN, with much more interactive and fair gameplay. Well, not always exactly fair, but pretty close.
I should have checked left field at some point. But dude! Fuck you. Stop! Dude, I'm lagging!
So let's go over how UCN Deluxe changes the base game of Ultimate Custom Night. We'll go over how the game has been universally changed first, then we can go into some animatronic specific differences, as the difficulty power balance from vanilla UCN to Deluxe is pretty different. The most significant change from vanilla to Deluxe is that now any kind of stalling mechanics have been completely removed. If you remember from vanilla UCN, animatronics would just wait outside your office until the cameras were pulled up to either spawn or jump scare you. Well, now they simply do not care, and this goes for literally everyone. So anyone that was office stalled before will now just straight up jump scare you, and anyone that could only spawn with the cameras up will now just appear randomly. The night length has also been increased from 4 minutes and 30 seconds to a full 6 minutes, with a perfect 1 minute to 1 in-game hour ratio. To compensate for the increased tool usage and extended night length, the power has also been changed so that 1% of Deluxe power is worth significantly more than 1% of vanilla power, by a factor of roughly 1.66 times. The duct and vent systems have now also been changed so that you have to check them frequently throughout the night. In vanilla UCN, when you placed an audio lure or set a vent snare, it would remain in that position until you placed it somewhere else. However, in UCN Deluxe, the audio lure and vent snare will now slowly fade over time, meaning you'll now have to go back and check both the duct system and vent system throughout the entire night. Now let's talk about some character changes. A big change in UCN Deluxe is that every character's intervals have been completely randomized. You see, in vanilla UCN, certain characters would always appear or jump scare on given intervals. For pretty much every character in the game, their technical info would always follow the formula of on X second intervals, X character has a chance to appear and jump scare you when the cameras are up. This is why whenever you watch a skilled vanilla UCN player, you'll hear them literally destroy the enter key for L chip on every 10-second mark, since he always appears on 10-second intervals. So now every character is pretty much impossible to predict with the timer. There are also some characters that have been notably reworked. To make this easier, we'll go through each type of character in groups, and generally there's 5. There's office characters that you have to deal with when you're sitting in the office, camera characters, which are characters that you directly interact with in the camera system, door characters, which spawn at the doors and require you to block them off, there's progression characters, which require some sort of tool to be used to keep them at bay, and distraction characters. Before we get into the changes for each character, I do want to remind you guys that it would mean the world to me if you subscribed. It helps more than literally anything for the channel. But of course, only do so if you're enjoying the video so far. At the end of the normal Deluxe NDC section, I'll briefly go over a ranking in tier list form for all of the characters, because some characters went from stupid easy in normal UCN to like top 1 in Deluxe. Out of the 5 groups, we'll start with our office characters. And honestly, a lot of the changes to office characters are more quality of life changes and reworks than direct buffs. Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and Withered Bonnie have all been significantly nerfed from their base game counterparts. Because we're going to be in the cameras for much longer in UCN Deluxe, these 3 mask characters went from being mega free in normal UCN to now throwing off the entire cycle of the game whenever they spawn. Thankfully, they don't kill nearly as fast, usually giving you enough time to finish whatever you're doing in the cameras before dealing with them. One of the most hated characters in Ultimate Custom Night, Night Marionette, has been slightly nerfed in Deluxe. In Vanilla, Night Marionette would slowly materialize on top of your cursor if you kept it in one of his positions for too long. If he fully materialized, he would jump scare you. In Deluxe, he's pretty similar, though he now appears slower and disappears much faster. For our last notable character change, I have to talk about Rockstar Chica in one of the best quality of life changes in history. Alright, so normally in Vanilla UCN, in order to move the wet floor sign, you have to do a quote-unquote double click. Unfortunately, the double clicking that the game wants is far different from a double click that you're probably used to. In order for a double click to properly register in a click team game, you have to click on the exact same pixel twice in a row. This doesn't sound too hard, you just don't move your mouse. But when both of the wet floor sign spawns are on top of Night Marionette, and you have to quickly flick your mouse in, double click, then get out, it's pretty difficult. And thank the Lord, because the wet floor sign in UCN Deluxe only requires 1 click to move. Everyone else in the office is either are unchanged from vanilla or not really different enough to care about. Golden Freddy did get a cool reskin though. Now let's talk about our camera characters. Bonnie and Foxy have been changed so that you now actually have to check Pirate's Cove pretty frequently. In vanilla UCN, you could abuse a technique called zero frame flipping in order to switch whoever was on the desk without committing to opening the cameras. However, Bonnie and Foxy are now guaranteed to switch after a given amount of time, so you can't stall out with Bonnie on the desk like you could in vanilla. All of the plushie animatronics have had their prices
I didn't know I had that much.
increased from 20 Faz coins to 40. And now you have a full hour to buy the plushie rather than just 20 seconds. Moving over to the vents and the ducts, every animatronic within the duct and vent system has now been given a unique purpose, whereas in vanilla, you check both of these once at the beginning of the night, then never again. In the vent system, Mangle and Withered Chica will bonk on the vent snares, but Springtrap, Molten Freddy, and Ennard can go right through them and will have to be dealt with by closing the front vent door in the office. It is worth noting that while Mangle can phase directly through the office vent door, even when it's closed, Withered Chica cannot. So if you're ever sandwiched and forced to let one of them through, let Withered Chica through and close the front vent until you hear her bonk. Ennard and Springtrap retain their mechanics from the vanilla game. Just close the front vent when you hear Ennard scurry and when you see Springtrap appear visually. Molten Freddy, however, does not make an audio cue or a visual cue, and you'll have to track him on the cameras in order to know when to close the front vent door. The duct system is probably the most changed part of Deluxe in comparison to vanilla UCN. In the ducts, you have to fend off the mediocre melodies using the audio lure and changing which duct is open or closed. In vanilla UCN, the ducts were generally dealt with by placing a lure which would permanently stun Happy Frog, Mr. Hippo, and Pigpatch, then using the heater to push back Ned Bear and Orville. However, the heater is now completely ineffective. Instead, you'll have to use the ducts as a sort of closed door that Ned Bear and Orville will now bonk on. Whenever either of them gets close to a closed duct, Whenever either of them gets close to a closed duct, they'll bonk and you'll be awarded a Faz coin like any other animatronic hitting a door. Pigpatch and Mr. Hippo have also been changed to now ignore the audio lure if it's placed on the same side for more than 2 cycles. So you will have to change the lure and open side pretty frequently. Fortunately, Happy Frog will still fall for the lure regardless of how long she's been in the same spot. This can all seem a bit complex, so we'll get more into how to deal with the duct specifically in the strategy section. Funtime Foxy has the same mechanic that he does in vanilla. Simply select the camera when the hour switches. However, you'll be dealing with him more here than in vanilla UCN. In the vanilla game, the next showtime can be set from a range of 1 to 3 hours away. Now, in Deluxe, it is instead 1 to 2 hours away. To balance this out, compared to vanilla where you had to be on his camera and watching the cameras when the hour changed, in Deluxe, you now simply have to have his camera selected. So you can be in the office and it'll still count as watching him, which is a very nice quality of life change. All of the other camera characters work nearly identically to how they are in vanilla, with some having slightly longer kill timers to balance out the increased cycle time in Deluxe. Now let's move on to our door characters. Door characters in UCN Deluxe will become a recurring theme for my weakness throughout this video, as now we're forced to deal with them throughout the entire night. While most characters are unchanged, just spawning whenever they want rather than waiting for the cameras to be up, Afton has been significantly buffed. In vanilla UCN, Afton can only appear once per night, and compared to all the other kill timers for door characters, his is by far the fastest and most reaction based. There's a lot more technical details that make Afton really hard for this challenge, but they aren't really that obvious until Hopeless Pursuit. Instead of appearing once a night like in vanilla, he will now appear multiple times throughout the night. He has the same attack timer as he does in vanilla, so he adds a lot of keyboard chaos with the quick reactions you need to deal with him. While there aren't very many progression characters, in fact there's only 4 of them, they've all received pretty significant changes. You see, in vanilla UCN, the 5 tools in your office faced a similar problem to the animatronics. They are wildly unbalanced. The usual tool strategy for vanilla is known as the GMB cycle. Without getting too technical, the GMB cycle is basically having the global music box on for half the night, and then to break it up and recover power and temperature using the power generator and fan. Not only was this strategy very easy to learn, the GMB took care of every single progression animatronic by itself. This means that the heater, power AC, and especially silent ventilation weren't required at all in the vanilla game. So in UCN Deluxe, a bit of tool rebalancing was done to force some usage of the other tools. We see this first and most prominently with Lefty. In vanilla, Lefty would get aggravated from temperature and noise and was calmed down with the global music box. He still gets angry from heat and noise in Deluxe, but now we have to use the silent ventilation to cool him down instead of the GMB. For the puppet, both winding the box manually and using the GMB have been changed to be much faster than in vanilla UCN, making him a lot easier overall. as now you only have to give him 2 to 3 seconds of winding either way. Music Man is functionally the same as he was in vanilla, but now you'll be forced to actually pay attention to his progress instead of just relying on the GMB cycle. The power AC and heater have been slightly reworked through Nightmare Chica and Lefty. In vanilla, Nightmare Chica was repelled using the power AC, but in UCN Deluxe, the power AC would be kind of overpowered. It cools the office ridiculously fast, barely makes any noise, and like any other tool, only takes 1 bar of usage. So now, Nightmare Chica is repelled with the heater instead, forcing you to heat up the office. Power AC usage is also discouraged, as it now aggravates Lefty. So generally, you only want to cool down the office through the power generator and fan. Speaking of temperature, Jacko Chica has been straight up buffed, now killing significantly faster if the office is ever over 90 degrees. Lastly are the distraction characters. These distraction characters are all mostly identical to their vanilla counterparts minus the universal random interval changes. Though we do have another quality of life change in the balloon from Trash and the Gang, who is now much more transparent so you can actually see the cameras unlike the vanilla game. That's it for the main roster, but if you're familiar with 5020, you know there's actually 56 characters in the night, not just 50, as Zor will add 6 secret characters. Just like vanilla, Zor will be guaranteed to appear in 5020. However, in Deluxe, he will always spawn at 11 seconds, so there's no RNG with when the characters will spawn. The biggest buff the Zor characters received was how they spawn. In vanilla, besides Bonnet, the Zor characters would only spawn once, and once they were dealt with, they were gone for the rest of the night. In Deluxe, however, the 5 secret characters that only spawn once have now received the Afton treatment, and will now continuously respawn throughout the night. With all of these changes and rebalancing, not only is Deluxe much more interactive in its camera and tool usage, it is also way harder. If we go back to our ladder chart here, you could say the jump from 5020 to NDC is about 3 times. So NDC is 3 times harder than normal 5020. Now, jumping from vanilla NDC to deluxe NDC, that's easily a 3 to 5 times difficulty multiplier. And deluxe NDC to hopeless pursuit, oh man, we'll get to that later. So with all of these character changes, what does the strategy for Deluxe even look like? With 56 total characters active, you may think that dealing with all of them would be really confusing, but don't worry, 90% of the time, characters can be dealt with using a consistent cycle pioneered by none other than Brayden. 5020 and 5020 NDC share the same cycle, but depending on who you deathcoin, the cycle does change a little bit. The deathcoin roster is the same as vanilla, as you can only deathcoin 6 of the most key characters in the night, those being Bonnie and Foxy, Puppet and Chica, Rockstar Bonnie, Toy Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Lefty. Unlike vanilla, all deathcoin routes here are viable, so choose whoever gives you the most trouble, but I personally recommend you deathcoin Puppet and Chica, since Puppet adds about 2 seconds to each cam cycle, and Chica is very inconsistent and hard to hear when starting out. When entering the night, you want to first hold down the spacebar, just like vanilla, but do not turn on the power generator, as this will make Music Man very angry very quickly, and we're going to have to keep him as calm as possible for the camera cycles when cooling down the office. Similar to vanilla strategies, we're going to enter the ducks and place a lure in the middle left. Now we want to begin coin farming. Coin farming in Deluxe has been tweaked a bit to allow the player to farm more coins. Helpy, BB, and JJ will all spawn on every single flip, every time, guaranteed. For coin farming in Deluxe, it is highly recommended that you learn maskless coin farming. Maskless was originally implemented in runs of 50-40 mode in vanilla UCN, and takes advantage of Golden Freddy's lenient kill timer in the office. Instead of putting on the mask every time you pull up the cameras, instead just pull up the cameras again before Golden Freddy even has a chance to kill you. You can take this a step further by moving your mouse and clicking things in the camera monitor while you coin farm. While this technically isn't required, we're going to need a lot more coins than vanilla UCN, and especially later on for Hopeless Pursuit, you're going to have to get really good at coin farming. The more coins you get, the better. At the 14-second mark, you're going to want anywhere from 20 to 30 coins. If Foxy spawned on the desk when the night started, make sure you also work a Foxy check in there while you're coin farming. Now, once Zor has shown up, stop coin farming and enter the cameras. Head straight for the music box, wind the box fully, then place a lure in the same spot as before. Place a snare in the left spot, deal with Toy Freddy, select Funtime Foxy's camera, then drop the cameras. If you have to coin farm more at this point, you can, but generally you should have enough. Now we can start the general cycle for the entire night. This cycle is generally broken up into two parts, the camera cycle and the office cycle. Camera cycles are when you're actively navigating through the camera monitor and dealing with threats all throughout the building. While you're in the cameras, a few characters will begin to spawn in the office. So once you drop the cameras, you then have to deal with all the threats in the office cycle. Now here is the general strategy for the camera cycle. Right before you open the cameras, you want to see if Foxy or Bonnie is on the desk. Then, depending on who is on the desk, either check Foxy's camera if it was Foxy, or go straight to cam 4 if it was Bonnie. Now, wind the music box and listen very carefully. In vanilla, Chica was dealt with through the global music box, and wasn't a threat whatsoever, but in Deluxe, we actually have to play her mechanic. Chica's mechanic is simple on paper, but in my opinion is the hardest mechanic to deal with in Deluxe. If Chica is happy, you'll hear pots and pans banging in the background, and if she's not, you won't hear anything. If Chica is unhappy, you have to change the music to keep her from jump scaring you, but if you change the music while she's happy, she also just jump scares you. This would be fine, however, there are two key problems with Deluxe that make this mechanic so difficult. The first of which is the actual audio file that the game uses for the pots and pans sound effect. Chica's pots and pans sound is a continuously looping 11-second audio clip. However, the last 1.5 seconds of this file are silent in order to have the clip repeat. So sometimes you'll be listening for Chica during this 1 to 2 seconds of silence, and you'll think, oh wow, that's dead silence, I should probably change the music, and then you die because she was still happy. The other problem is that so much is happening in Deluxe with the amount of doors you're shutting and cameras that you're selecting that it's really hard to hear the subtle pots and pans over all of it. Like here, let's do a quick test. Can you hear the pots and pans? As you're winding the box, quickly glance at the temperature for the building. Both Jacko, Chica, and Lefty will get angry if the temperature gets too high, and generally, we never want the temp going over 80 degrees. So if the temperature while you're winding the box is 65 degrees or higher, turn on the power generator and fan. In UCN, every item that you turn on will add 1 usage to your power. So if I have 2 doors closed and the fan on, I'd be using 3 usage. Now, turning the power generator on will subtract 1 usage from that counter. Power isn't too hard in NDC Deluxe, but generally speaking, we only want to have 1 usage on at all times. So if we had the power gen and fan on while we're in the cameras, functionally we'd still only have 1 usage, because the power generator cancels out the fan's usage. Once you finish winding the box and change the music if need be, make your way to the duct system. The ducts are generally one of the most confusing systems for newer players, but I think I have a general explanation that might help. So think of the audio lure as a temporary wall rather than an actual lure, and the closed duct as a permanent wall. Now, whichever duct has Orville or Nedbear close to it, you need to change to closed. Then you always want to have the lure on the same side as the open duct to act as a temporary wall. Remember that Mr. Hippo and Pigpatch will get tired of the audio lure if it's placed in the same spot for more than 2 cycles. So if you can, always change the lure and ducts around. It is a bit easier to differentiate who is who, as Deluxe adds new cartoon icons for the ducts and the vents. Once you've dealt with the duct system, make your way to the vents, which are a lot simpler to deal with than the ducts. You're only really looking for 2 animatronics, Withered Chica and Mangle. Remember that Withered Chica and Mangle are dealt with through the vent snares, and everyone else is dealt with through the door. So you want to recognize where Chica and Mangle are and place the vent snare on whichever side you think they're closest to. Even if you're placing the snare on the same side, you still want to click it again, as remember, the lure and the snare will both fade over time. Though because there are 2 animatronics that are dealt with through the snare, sometimes you can get the quote-unquote Deluxe has no RNG situation, where Mangle and Chica basically pincer you by lining up to hit 2 different vent snares at the same time. And there's 2 ways you can deal with this. In both cases, you always want to prioritize Mangle, as she will go straight through the vent office door even if it's closed. Now, once you've closed off Mangle's snare, you can either leave and come back to the vent system before this camp cycle is over, or you can just keep the front vent closed until you think Withered Chica has bonked on it. Just beware, as this will use a lot of power. Once you've dealt with Mangle and Chica, be sure to see if Molten Freddy is about to hit the vent, and close him if he is. Then we can move on to the camera system. The cycle in the cameras is actually really well designed, and to understand why, we have to look at some of the most important characters in UCN Deluxe. First is Rockstar Bonnie. Rockstar Bonnie is known for being one of the hardest characters in the base game of UCN. He is so difficult, in fact, the strategy for dealing with him in vanilla UCN is to never hit his intervals so he never spawns, and if he does, you just reset the run because it is not winnable. But here, he's always going to spawn. His mechanic from the base game remains unchanged though. Once he spawns in, you have to find his guitar on the cameras, then click it to grab it. The guitar will always spawn in either the left hall, right hall, Toy Freddy's camera, or Funtime Foxy's camera, so we can add those to our list of cameras to check. It will always be in the bottom left corner of each of these cameras. So as you're mousing through the cameras, keep an eye on the bottom left corner of the screen for the guitar. And this works out perfectly for us, as every threat that we have to deal with in the cameras is in these 4 cameras. So once you're done with the vents, first check the right hall, then the left hall. If the time just changed to 1, 3, or 5 AM, you can see which plushie animatronic is in the right hall. Then move into the left hall to check for Freddy. You can also track Freddy using intervals, and this is honestly the much better strategy, but we'll get more into that later. Now, briefly glance at Lefty's camera to see what stage he's in. If he's standing up, keep note of his position, but don't turn on the silent ventilation quite yet. Remember, we always want to maintain that 1 usage max throughout the entire night. Having silent ventilation on while you're in the cameras would burn through your power insanely fast. Now move up to Toy Freddy's camera and play his game. Mr. Hugs is guaranteed to move every cycle, so he'll never be in the same spot that you already blocked off in the last cycle. Meaning that if you're on a camera and Mr. Hugs isn't there and the other camera is blocked off, you know for sure that Mr. Hugs is currently in the only other open camera. These minor optimizations for speed are crucial to get down for NDC Deluxe and especially HP, so anytime that we can gain the slightest bit of time anywhere, we should take it. Now, if you're on a plushie cycle, you can go to Cam 7 and buy the plushie. If not, hit Funtime Foxy's camera and wait for about a second. Remember that Plush Trap will reappear throughout the night. So if he's there, wait until he leaves his chair, then reset the ventilation. So now here's what a full cam cycle looks like in full speed. Now we're ready for the office cycle, which is significantly shorter and easier in my opinion. As soon as you drop the cameras, remember what stage Lefty was in earlier. If he was still sitting down, just turn off the power gen and fan with 1 in space. But if he was standing up in cam 3, right as you drop the cameras, press 2 and then space to both turn on the silent ventilation and turn off the fan. Since we're no longer in the cameras, using silent ventilation here will only cost us 1 usage while soothing Lefty and working to keep the office a bit cooler. Now, once we're in the office, throw on the mask immediately for any mask characters that may have spawned and Golden Freddy. Then click Helpy and move the wet floor sign to despawn Rockstar Chica. While you're here, make sure to use the flashlight to despawn the Freddles. You can flash while you're in the cameras, but doing it during the office cycle will use less power. Just make sure that you're not flashing Nightmare Balloon Boy if he's sitting down, which is a lot easier said than done. Once you've dealt with any other office threats, check who's on the desk, then you can repeat the cam cycle. Do not wait around in the office once you're done with everything. Just start another camera cycle and keep going immediately. Now, as simple as this cycle may sound, we do have to deal with some characters who will break our camera cycle. Those being Withered Bonnie, Toy Chica, and Bonnet. For the 3 mask characters, if you're not quick enough or they spawn at the start of a cycle, you will have to pull down your monitor and deal with them in the office or they will jump scare you.
5 points. Please deposit 5 points.
Get as far as you can into a cycle just before you die, then put on the mask. A general guideline here is that if you're finished dealing with the vent system, you can always finish the cycle fully before they jump scare you, but if you're not there yet, you're gonna have to break your cycle and deal with them. Once they leave, deal with everything that spawns in the office on that flip, then flip back up, finish the camera cycle, and continue with the normal office cycle. This is by far the hardest part in NDC Deluxe, as you'll have to adapt on the fly to a masked character breaking the cycle. And if they decide to line up one after another, it can get really crazy trying to keep your cycle. Here's the best example of this where I have honestly no idea how I survived this. Okay, Deluxe has no RNG. Alright, okay. Bro. Dude, holy shit, that was like that was the 2 bad instances of Deluxe RNG in 1. That was, bro, oh my god. Bonnet is the same as these masked characters, but she moves slower when you're in the cameras, so you can usually finish a camera cycle in time even if she spawns at the very start of the cycle. Then click her at the far left of the office. If you don't think you're fast enough, you can flip down mid-camera cycle anyway, click her nose, deal with everything in the office, then finish the camera cycle. Now, that was a lot, and this was quite a jump for me in learning this max mode and eventually beating it. We've been talking a lot about the strategy for UCN Deluxe and how it works, but now that we understand 50/20 Deluxe, let's talk about how hard it is and my experience with it. So right away, let's get some idea of how hard this is by comparing it to other stuff that I've done on this channel. If I had to list my hardest FNAF achievements that I've made videos on for this channel, I'd probably say the 1 million Faz rating FNAF 6 playthrough, the worst luck sister location pre-patch, rat and cut all challenges with OG laser pointer, and the FNAC gauntlet. And honestly, with the exception of the $1 million Faz rating playthrough, NDC Deluxe completely destroys all of these. And the average run in the FNAF 6 challenge was 2 hours long, whereas NDC Deluxe is only 6 minutes. And I think the most obvious reason for why UCN Deluxe was such a shock for difficulty for me is the addition of what the max mode community calls keyboard torture. You see, in other FNAF games, the most important skill is usually your aim. And trust me, your aim is super important here too. In fact, most players list UCN Deluxe as one of the most aim-based games out of the FNAF max modes. But I didn't have a problem with aiming, since I had done challenges that were entirely aim-based before in Finds of Candies 3. But the amount of keyboard interaction that you have to constantly worry about in Deluxe was extremely hard to get used to. And I think we can see this best with the distraction and door characters. Let's take 2 distraction characters as an example, L-Chip and Lolbit. Now in vanilla UCN, L-Chip is very easily tracked with intervals, and Lolbit appears so late into the night that you're already in the office stalling portion of the game by the time that he appears. Both of these characters require you to take your hand off of all of your door and tool keys, and move it the whole way over to LOL in the case of Lolbit, or Enter in the case of L-Chip, which sure is fine normally, but in Deluxe, where characters are constantly appearing at your doors, it can be hard to get your hand over there that fast, then accurately move it back to close the door on a different character. If you throw someone like Afton into the mix, who only gives you a little over a second to react to him crashing through the vent, you can see how this becomes a problem. You'd have to get your hand the whole way from the right side of the keyboard back to the W, A, S, and D keys, then press F before he jump scares you. Thankfully, there was a workaround for this keyboard torture. In the UCN Deluxe menu, if you click the small gear next to the Go button, you'll actually be able to change your keybinds for everything in the game. This is something that I feel was lacking from vanilla UCN, and it is super useful here. I was typically fast enough with my enter presses to get rid of L-Chip, but Lolbit really gave me a lot of trouble. So I asked my coach for UCN Deluxe, Firefuel, what keys I should rebind for Lolbit, and he said Q and E. This took some time getting used to, and I had a few deaths to instinctively spamming LOL when he appeared, but eventually I was able to get used to Q and E, which made the keyboard chaos a bit more manageable. Fuel had also said to rebind L-Chip to left shift instead of enter, but this was a habit that I really couldn't break yet, and I was so fast with my enter presses that honestly I didn't really feel that making the change was worth it. Other than some rough keyboard combos, there were some other characters that just gave me a bit of trouble. I said earlier in this section that I'd make a tier list for some of the hardest characters, so Fuel and I cooked up an NDC Deluxe tier list. At the top, to no one's surprise, are the masked characters. When masked characters force you to deal with them mid-camera cycle, sometimes it's really hard to readjust and get back on cycle, especially if there are any other office threats that are present when you drop the cameras. Toy Freddy was also somewhat challenging, just because of how small his game is. It's pretty difficult to move your mouse in such a small space so quickly in order to play his game consistently, and it can definitely be a big time waster if your aim isn't that good. But honestly, for me, none of these characters were what was causing me to lose for so long in NDC Deluxe. Once I had mastered cam cycles and changed my keybinds to have better control with Lolbit, I didn't have too much trouble with aiming or dealing with the door and distraction characters. Funnily enough, the character that gave me the most trouble was actually FNAF 1 Freddy. Freddy is the only character in NDC Deluxe that works on intervals. Every 50 seconds, you just close the left door for 1 full second until he leaves. But for some reason, I just could not comprehend these intervals while I was dealing with so many other threats. I had to beat the Freddy intervals into my head and always memorize 50, 140, 230, 320, 410, 5, and 550. But there was one thing that separated NDC Deluxe from all the other challenges that I've done in videos so far. See, normally on an average The Bones 5 video, there's a period where I'm just miserable after trying to attempt a challenge for so long. But here, that didn't really happen with NDC Deluxe. I had played it in the background while I was making the FNAF 6 Millionaire Challenge video, and honestly, the game was just super fun to me. I liked how it rewarded speed, and I thought the cycle was pretty fun. And honestly, I hadn't had this much fun filming a video since the Rat and Cattle Challenges video. I had a pretty funny strategy in order to beat NDC Deluxe as well. Usually, players would build up by beating 40-20, then 45-20, then maybe 50-20 with the Death Coin, or 50-20 without Zor. I just said screw that, I'll learn the cycle for NDC Deluxe and then just jump straight to that. And surprisingly, even without any build-up whatsoever, there weren't too many walls where I was just stuck and not making any progress. I had been making decent progress throughout November and into December, and luckily my progress coincided perfectly with a charity event hosted by my good friend Vonnie for Thankmas. So I decided to raise for his charity with an NDC Deluxe stream. If there was any time to beat NDC Deluxe and have a new hardest max mode, it would be now. And with that, I officially had a new hardest max mode that wasn't some obscure FNAC 3 pre-patch. And to be honest, I could have stopped here. At the beginning of this video, I said that I wanted to challenge myself like I never had before, and from what I've seen on YouTube, I hadn't seen anyone make any videos on challenges that were skill-wise harder than NDC Deluxe. But it wasn't good enough. I wanted something more. I wanted a challenge so crazy, so absurd, that it would redefine my entire channel. And there is one more max mode that's left in UCN Deluxe. Okay, well remember before how I said 50-20 Deluxe NDC could be about 3 to 5 times harder than vanilla NDC? Well, Hopeless Pursuit could be anywhere from 10 to 20 times harder than NDC Deluxe. So just for fun, let's go back to 50-20 and really see how far we've come. If we lowball the difficulty multipliers, that's 3 times 3 times 10, making Hopeless Pursuit 90 to 100 times harder than normal 50-20 mode in vanilla UCN. So how hard is Hopeless Pursuit? Well, you could take pretty much every FNAF challenge that I've ever done, and compared to HP, they mean literally nothing. FNAF Lock, Rat and Cattle Challenges, 1 million fast rating in FNAF 6, 4 games at once, 6 hour 420, they aren't even a speck compared to the monster of HP. The reason why Hopeless Pursuit is so much harder than NDC Deluxe is because almost every character has received buffs in one way or another. Every character that would handicap you for missing them or incorrectly dealing with them will now always result in death. If you watch Bonnie on the cameras instead of Foxy, well, your cameras are permanently gone. BB or JJ get into your office, there goes your doors or flashlight for the entire night. Miss OMC, you can never open the cameras ever again. If you miss Phantom Mangle on the cameras, she will literally stay in your office forever. And Phantom Balloon Boy doesn't even kick you out of the cameras, he just straight up kills you now. Point is, everyone has been cracked out of their minds, and this whole mode feels like a Kaizo version of UCN. So let's go over all of the Hopeless Pursuit changes. We'll do this in the same way that we went over the NDC changes, by the 5 different groupings of characters. But this time, whenever we talk about a character, I want to give them a difficulty ranking, as the difference in difficulty between characters is a lot more important in Hopeless Pursuit than in NDC Deluxe. But before we can talk about characters, there are a few universal changes that we have to go over. The moment that you spawn in, you might notice, I only have 60% power. Thankfully, we don't just have 60%, that just wouldn't be possible. In fact, the green run world record for normal NDC Deluxe is 38%, held by Pyrus and Almohadales. So with how much we're closing the doors in HP, there is no way we'd be able to survive that. Thankfully, Rockstar Foxy has been reworked to give us more power. In vanilla UCN and UCN Deluxe, Rockstar Foxy would rarely spawn, and if you got lucky and he didn't jump scare you immediately when you clicked MeBird,
5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins. Please deposit 5.
Yeah,
Thank you
you
for
win some,
depositing
give me.
5 coins.
Yarg, you play with fire, and sometimes you get burned.
he'd give you 4 different options you could choose from that would help you. Now in HP, Rockstar Foxy's parrot is guaranteed to spawn every 30 seconds, and he'll never jump scare you when you click it. Instead, he'll now present you with 4 new options. The top one will give you 5% more power, and the rest will immediately sabotage you by either warming up the office, making a ton of noise, or stealing 10 of your Faz coins. So we can't even have power normally. Hopeless Pursuit makes you fight for literally everything. And if we miss even one MeBird from Rockstar Foxy, or hit one of the other options, it is very likely that we won't have enough power to finish the night. The other universal change has to do with Faz coins. Because so many characters that influence Faz coins have been buffed in Hopeless Pursuit, Faz coins overall are much harder. In regular Deluxe, plushies would cost 40 coins each, and you could carry a max of 100. Now in Hopeless Pursuit, plushie animatronics have been mega buffed to cost 60 whole Faz coins, and you can only carry a max of 70 coins total. The ventilation also goes out significantly faster in HP. And in order to maintain good visibility, you'll have to reset it twice per camera cycle. But there are a lot more changes on the character side of things. When we talk about each character in a group, I'll give them a tiered difficulty ranking from 1 to 5. We'll go deeper into the tier 1 characters specifically after we're done with all of the changes, as they are all like insane. But just know for now that literally everyone in HP is difficult to some extent. There is not a single useless character. To start off, let's talk about our largest set of characters in the camera characters. We use the exact same camera cycle in Hopeless Pursuit that we did in NDC, so I'll go in the order that we see them in the camera cycle, starting off with Bonnie and Foxy. If you end up looking at Bonnie on the cameras, he will now permanently disable the cameras for the entire night. Foxy is also much more lethal, as now he doesn't even have stages anymore. Usually, Foxy would progress through 4 stages before he makes his way into your office and ends your game, but here, if he progresses even a single stage, he just instantly jump scares you.
That was Bonnie. I'm sure of it.
The puppet has been changed so that the music box now drains much faster and whines a bit slower, so now you'll have to dedicate a lot more time to whining the box per cycle. The hardest character in base NDC, Chica, has also been buffed and reworked. In HP, she's more likely to get angry, but to compensate, she gives a lot more time to switch the music. You can also now only hear her when you're selected on camera 4, whereas in NDC, you could hear her throughout the entire building. Moving on to the duck system, we see a rare instance of a nerf from NDC to HP. Now, don't worry, there's only like 3 of these throughout the entire change, and this is 2 of the 3. Orville and Nedbear were previously the only difficult parts of the ducks in NDC. However, they now move extremely slow in Hopeless Pursuit. In fact, during the duck cycle, you can simply change the side of the lure, then open the previously closed duct, and you will always survive. The challenge here isn't thinking about which animatronics are headed where and planning accordingly. It's more so an aim-based challenge of trying to change the ducks around fast enough to keep up with the breakneck speed of everything else. Which is why, despite Orville and Nedbear being bumped from tier 1s to tier 5s, Hippo, Pigpatch, and Happy Frog are all solid tier 2s. As the buttons to change the ducks, and especially changing the lure around, requires a good bit of accuracy. And you'll notice that when we get into the strategy segment, that the overall philosophy behind Hopeless Pursuit is sacrificing brain power and planning for raw skill, aim, and keyboard torture. We see this again as we move into the vents. Both Mangle and Withered Chica have been significantly buffed in their speed, and the quote-unquote deluxe has no RNG situation can now no longer happen. Also, as a small quality of life change, the moment Mangle and Chica overlap with a vent snare, they'll instantly bonk, whereas in NDC, they actually have to overlap with it for half a second. This might not seem like a big deal, but half a second in HP is a massive difference. Now, moving into the camera system, you might remember that the entire basis for the cam cycle was Rockstar Bonnie's guitar locations. And oh boy, did Rockstar Bonnie get quite the buff in HP. You see, Rockstar Bonnie is the first of our perma characters. That's right, in Hopeless Pursuit, some characters will now just stay in your office for the entire night once they show up for the first time. Where normally you could take care of them and they would leave by playing their mechanic, now that mechanic just resets their kill timer and prolongs the inevitable. Rockstar Bonnie is also a bit faster to kill, but his perma buff is definitely more significant. Toy Freddy has also been noticeably buffed, and his kill timer is way shorter.
I couldn't see anything, bro.
I can't tell you how many times I've been literal frames away from closing the door on Mr. Hugs just for Toy Freddy to game over right in my face. Toy Freddy serves as a perfect reminder that in HP, you are always on the brink of death constantly. And if you aren't fast enough, someone's gonna check you for it. Now, on the last camera, we have Funtime Foxy and Plushtrap. Plushtrap got the same treatment as Rockstar Bonnie and is now permanent. And Funtime Foxy now has a showtime every single hour. Before we move on to the other groups of characters, there are two camera characters that have been heavily buffed from NDC. Right as you open the cameras, Phantom Mangle will always appear, giving you 1 second to hit the camera button and despawn her. Thankfully, the camera button is pretty large, so she's not that terrible. However, her partner, Phantom BB, has gone from completely free to a high tier 1. Phantom BB can randomly appear on the cameras as you're moving through them, and only gives you 1 second to react and click the same camera or switch cameras to make him disappear. Not only is his kill timer insanely fast, but if you fail to get rid of him, he just straight up kills you, with a completely custom jumpscare animation unique to Hopeless Pursuit. He combos very well with Rockstar Bonnie and Phone Guy, as your brain wants you to click on the items that you have to get, so you don't realize that Phantom BB is there until it's too late. As you're moving through the cameras, you'll be constantly harassed by our next group of animatronics, the door characters. I would say that this entire group in NDC was the easiest of the 5 categories, as they generally didn't spawn much. However, in HP, my god. Dude, that was an impossible keyboard combo. That was a straight up impossible keyboard combo. You can't tell me a single sequence of inputs that you could do to win that. There is literally no way. Alright, let's get some of the obvious ones out of the way. Nightmare and Nightmare Fredbear are absolutely insane in Hopeless Pursuit. Nightmare went from appearing at the door roughly every 25 to 30 seconds to now appearing every 3 to 5 seconds. I'm sorry, did I say every 3 to 5 seconds? My bad. I must have been misinformed. He can appear every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds he can appear. Fredbear is the same, but appears slightly less. These two alone make up so much keyboard clutter and make it extremely difficult to remember if you have a door closed or not. Ballora and Afton also appear a lot more frequently, but nowhere near as much as Nightmare and Fredbear. Our vent characters, Ennard, Springtrap, and Molten Freddy, also appear more frequently, but generally aren't that threatening. Now, the last 3 door characters have been reworked a bit. One in an honestly great change, and the others in the most infuriating way possible. Freddy actually got a pretty good change. In base NDC, Freddy would arrive at the door roughly every 50 seconds unless you were burning the building down. Once he was there, you'd have to close the door for 1 full second until he left. Though 1 second might not seem like a lot, it definitely feels like it, as every other door character except for Afton, because he's a little weird, will always leave the door after 0.5 seconds. And honestly, this kind of threw off the entire rhythm when you were playing NDC, and just felt a little weird. Freddy's intervals are also like impossible to remember. There's always so much stuff going on that you are bound to forget at least once. Now, keeping with the theme of breakneck speed and no brain power in Hopeless Pursuit, Freddy has been altered so that he now leaves after 0.5 seconds with the door closed like everyone else. But he'll only leave if you see him at the door on the cameras. which I think is a pretty fair change. And honestly, I'd rather him be like this in NDC as well. Now, the last pair of door characters I think were purely made to make you rage as hard as possible. Balloon Boy and JJ are so stupid in HP. Now, as we already know, a universal deluxe change is that Helpy, BB, and JJ will always spawn on every single camera flip so you can farm more coins to make up for the increase in plushie prices. However, in HP, if you don't close the side vent the literal second you pull up the cameras, this is incredibly annoying, especially when you have to coin farm so many coins in order to deal with the $60 plushies. And they honestly make coin farming deaths consistent the whole way through the HP experience. Next up, we have our distraction characters. And you might notice we got some pretty high rankings here. Let's talk about our tier 1s first, Old Man Consequences and Lawbit. What I think is most interesting about these tier 1s is that they're only ranked so high purely because of the game mode itself, not because they were actually buffed. I mean, OMC's lock is permanent, but you were pretty much dead if you locked your cams in NDC anyway. What makes OMC and Lawbit so difficult is that they take up your most crucial finger for the keyboard. To see what I mean, let's look at a basic layout of all the keys that you have to press constantly in Hopeless Pursuit. Now you'll notice that 5 separate keys for the right door, right vent, heater, Lawbit's E keybind, and OMC are all occupied by the left index finger. Most people would deal with OMC by spamming the C key until you catch his fish, but spamming the C key would mean neglecting everything else that your left index finger has to do. And in that time, it's very likely that someone that needs one of those keys can spawn and completely end your run. We'll get more into keyboard hell later in the strategy and my experience sections, but just know for now that distraction characters suck in Hopeless Pursuit. There are some other distraction characters, but honestly, they just mess up your screen for a second or two and don't do much else. Next up, we have our progression characters, and these guys haven't been changed very much. In my opinion, they are the easiest part of the night. Lefty is like the tiniest bit more aggressive, but because of the nature of Hopeless Pursuit, you'll naturally be using silent ventilation a lot more. Jacko Chica has been slightly buffed, now killing the second the office hits 90 degrees rather than quickly materializing. Normally this isn't a problem, but do be careful as she can very easily catch you off guard if you're not paying attention.
Deposit 5 coins.
Now, there is still one last category of animatronics that I haven't mentioned yet, because in Hopeless Pursuit, there is one group of characters that reigns far above the rest, and they are the office characters.
Oh my god.
The office characters in Hopeless Pursuit are far and away the hardest group of characters. And all of that is thanks to our inarguable top tier 1, Night Marionette. Bro, Night Marionette in HP is impossible. Like, bro, he actually makes me want to like... There's a reason that Night Marionette is not only important enough to be in the thumbnail, but also the giant Lovecraftian monster in all of the animation bits. If you need a quick refresher on his mechanic, if your cursor is on him for too long, he materializes and jump scares you. And as you would expect, he materializes really fast in Hopeless Pursuit compared to NDC, but he has another sneaky buff that you might not expect. And we actually saw this first in the Worst Luck series. You see, the way that Night Marionette works in vanilla UCN is through a form of randomness. He has 4 different positions that he randomly cycles through every second while he's invisible. Then, once he happens to randomly hit a position where your cursor currently is, he starts materializing. So, in theory, Worst Luck Night Marionette would just spawn directly on your cursor every time he has a chance to move. And guess what? In HP, that is exactly what he does. Not only does he materialize faster and instantly find your cursor, he still disappears faster like how he does in NDC. This gives him plenty of time to reappear wherever you move to, making him basically heat-seeking. The reason that this is such a big deal is that literally every clickable object in the office is in one of Night Marionette's positions. For example, let's look at the dreaded Me-Bird cycle. Once we drop the cameras here, we immediately have so many things we need to do. If we get unlucky, we'll have to click 4 separate animatronics right away, and they are all on Night Marionette's leftmost spawn. Helpy, Me-Bird, Bonnet, and the wet floor sign form a perfect column directly on Night Marionette's leftmost office spawn. So now, every single motion that you make in the office has to be a quick and accurate flick of the mouse. If you thought FNAC3 was a CSGO aim trainer, bro, I am telling you, hop on HP and play the 110 office cycle. Aside from the obvious king of Hopeless Pursuit, there are some other office character changes that are worth going over. Helpy's jump scare timer is a lot faster in HP. Usually, misclicking him once will result in you getting jump scared by him. In NDC, getting jump scared by Helpy would just slightly agitate Music Man, but on HP, Helpy will send Music Man straight to his last and most aggressive stage. Scrap Baby has been altered so that if you shock her when she isn't looking up at you, she steals 20% of your power. So unless your name is Bulan25, it guarantees a power out death. Rockstar Freddy, like Rockstar Bonnie, is another permanent character, meaning he never stops asking for coins once he gets activated around the 45-second mark. So paying him will just reset his kill timer, not actually satisfy him. His pay button is also right in the center of a Night Marionette spawn and a mini arena spawn, and honestly, with all the visual distractions, I had a lot of difficulty trying to hit it. The last office character that I want to go over is one that you probably wouldn't expect to be a tier 1, but honestly, I'll argue that Phone Guy is one of the hardest characters in Hopeless Pursuit. Now, this is going to get a little bit into conspiracy theory territory because I haven't looked into the UCN Deluxe code at all, but I swear the Phone Guy spawns in Hopeless Pursuit are always really bad on purpose. Now, the only reason why I listed Phone Guy as an office character is because of this spawn right here. This is just evil, bro. You have to flick to hit the mute call button here because he spawns smack dab in the middle of a Night Marionette hitbox, but if you flick the tiniest bit too hard, you'll end up pulling up the cameras too early and messing everything up. But that isn't the only time he spawned in absurd locations. Here he spawns right on the mini arena's head, so he's really hard to see. Sometimes when you're winding the box, he'll spawn on the complete opposite side of the screen, and you'll have to waste precious seconds flicking your mouse over to that side. Now with this one, I am convinced it is planned. At around the 50-second mark, the new challenger icon will appear for one of the Zor characters, and Phone Guy will spawn behind it. You cannot tell me this isn't on purpose.
That's so f***ed. What?
Also, like, dude, watch this. I swear he literally sees my cursor. So, as you can see from all of these insane buffs, Hopeless Pursuit is absolutely crazy. There's a reason that whenever a new max mode is verified and everyone wonders how hard it is, the first thing everyone says is below HP. So with all of that, what kind of strategy can we even use to deal with all of this? The strategy for HP is similar to NDC in a lot of ways. It's pretty much the same cycle. However, like I mentioned earlier, Hopeless Pursuit is all about raw skill in favor of zero RNG or adaptation. So Hopeless Pursuit could essentially be scripted out. In the early days of HP, before it was verified, Pyrus, one of the contenders to verify it, developed a strategy that details exactly when to open the cameras to start camera cycles, drastically increasing the consistency of runs. These were known as Pyrus cycles, and this was the backbone for all Hopeless Pursuit strategies going forward. Essentially, you wanted to always open the cameras on the intervals of 11, 26, 41, and 56, though not every cycle is the same. To differentiate these cycles, I'm going to break them up into odd cycles and even cycles. 11 and 41 being the first and third in the hour, so they're odd, and 26 and 56 being the second and fourth in the hour, so they're the even cycles. Now, within the camera cycle itself, there were also a lot of optimizations necessary to keep up with the breakneck speed of the overall cycle. The first of which was how I wound the puppet. Normally, I was used to opening the cams to get Foxy, then clicking on cam 4 and winding the box from there. But you can actually select cam 4, then go straight to the duck system and wind from there. As long as you have cam 4 selected on the camera system, switching to any of the other systems will keep the music box button on screen, and this helps with a load of different animatronics. For one, we can look at and assess the duck system while we're winding. That way, we know exactly where to go in the ducks once we're done winding. While we deal with the ducks and vents, you can also listen for Chica for much longer, and get a better idea of whether or not the music needs to be changed. This also prevents any fast Phantom BB deaths, as Phantom BB isn't able to spawn on the duct or vent system. As you enter the vent system, you want to immediately slam the right vent snare as fast as possible. Withered Chica is guaranteed to be ready to attack on every 33-second interval, so you want to make sure that you catch her here. While you're moving your cursor to get to the right vent, Find Mangle and close her off if need be. Now, when moving into the cameras, focus on the bottom left corner of the screen for Rockstar Bonnie's guitar. Remember that he's permanent, so if you miss the guitar on any cycle, you won't have enough time to recover and he will jump scare you. If you're on an even cycle, Freddy will be at the left door. I recommend closing the left door immediately as you get to his camera, as we don't want him desyncing from the overall cycle. Now, head up to Toy Freddy's camera and play his game. Do this as fast as possible, since he's usually on the brink of gaming over once you reach him. Now, head over to Funtime Foxy's camera and try to reset the ventilation. You can survive if you miss it here, but it will make the office cycle a lot harder to see. Also, make sure to wait on the camera for about half a second. Remember that Plushtrap here is permanent, so we're gonna have to get rid of him every single cycle. Plushtrap's time is cumulative, so if you watch him for a bit on one cycle, the time that you watched him will save. So at the end of every cycle, we're going to get half of his timer, and at the beginning of the next cycle, we're gonna finish it off. Now, when you drop the cameras, get ready for the entire reason this max mode is ranked so high, the office cycle. As I've said before, the office cycle is far and away the hardest part of Hopeless Pursuit, so I'm going to try and break it down as slow as possible. Depending on whether or not you are on an even or odd cycle, you may have to click MeBird for Rockstar Foxy. Let's assume that this is the hardest office cycle possible, because if you can do this, you can do literally any other office cycle. In this case, you're on an even cycle, so we'll have to grab MeBird, and Bonnet happened to spawn while you were in the cameras. This creates what I'm going to call the chaotic combo. When you drop the cameras all in less than a second, you have to click Helpy, MeBird, Bonnet, and the wet floor sign, all while avoiding the Night Marionette spawn that overlaps all 4 of these items. While doing this with your mouse hand, you need to press 3 in order to turn on the heater to get rid of Nightmare Chica, as Nightmare Chica will always spawn on MeBird cycles. Then, after the heater has been on for about a second, press 2 to activate the silent ventilation. Now, once you've moved the wet floor sign, there are 2 general strategies you can use for mouse movement. I like to call them the circle and the wall. The more common of the 2 is the circle, and I've seen this used by most Hopeless Pursuit victors. You first want to deal with the chaotic combo on the left side, then use the flashlight for about a second for the frettles. Do this while you're on the left side in case Nightmare BB is sitting down. Now move the wet floor sign to the right and follow it with your mouse. Then move it back to the left, flash Nightmare BB if he's standing up, pay Rockstar Freddy, and select the topmost option for Rockstar Foxy to get your 5% power. Then shock Scrap Baby if need be, turn on the power gen and fan with space and 1, then wait until the next Pyrus cycle time and open the cameras. You can kinda see how each item that you have to interact with forms a circle in the office, which is why it's called the circle. The wall is more so just going from left to right and clicking every single threat by changing your vertical position. Out of all of the HP victors, I've only really seen Almohadalis use this strategy for office cycles. I would often flip between this and the circle method, but ultimately I found the circle method to be more comfortable. If that sounds like a lot on its own, remember you're constantly being bombarded with door characters and distraction characters during all of this. Honestly, once you've done it so many times, it feels like you can almost stop time when you drop the cameras, just because your brain becomes so conditioned to recognize so many threats so quickly. Thankfully, that is the hardest part of the night, and as long as you know how to do that and camera cycles, you can beat Hopeless Pursuit. Though there are a few special cycles that I want to go over. The first is hour changes. The cam cycle at 56 seconds is generally the hardest cycle. Essentially, you're going to open the cameras and go to the music box like normal, but instead of going to the ducts, stay on the music box camera and wind the box up fully. Then, right before the hour changes, change to Funtime Foxy's camera and watch the showtime. Now we want to go into the ducts as fast as possible after the hour changes, since Happy Frog is practically going to be crawling out of the duct at this point. Now when you do this, don't stare at the timer and try to time it that way. You'll probably undershoot it. Instead, use Funtime Chica as a visual cue of when to switch. She appears every 10 seconds, so the moment you see her, click to change to the duct system and change the lure and duct around as fast as possible. Now run through the cameras as fast as you can, since Toy Freddy is going to game over in about 5 seconds. Now here's what an hour change cycle and office cycle looks like at full speed.
5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins. Deposit 5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins. Thank you for depositing 5 coins. Please deposit.
The only other kind of special cycles are the plushie cycles. At 1 minute, 3:11, and 5:41, you're going to have to buy the 3 plushies. The only difference here is that you'll have to quickly glance in Cam 2 to see which plushie animatronic it is. Then, after you get Toy Freddy, click on Cam 7 and buy the plushie as fast as you can. If you haven't already, you should definitely memorize the locations of each plushie and prize corner so that you don't waste too much time trying to buy them. If you can survive that, you've learned pretty much all that you need to know for HP. But trust me, saying that and then actually playing it are two very different things. I hope so far that this video has been a funny one that you guys could laugh at. Unfortunately, the rest of this video won't be like that. I won't lie to you guys, Hopeless Pursuit was the worst experience I've ever had playing a video game. Everything people say about Hopeless Pursuit is 100% true. It is really that bad. For the rest of this video, I'm gonna catalog my HP experience like how I did with the FNAF lock video, going day by day. However, in FNAF lock, that challenge only took 6 days. Now, you might be thinking, only took 6 days, dude, how long are you gonna spend on Hopeless Pursuit? Well, instead of days, we're gonna break up the grind into 4 to 5 day sections. I started HP all the way back in mid-December, but at this point I was more so just playing it in the background and focusing on other things. I truly experienced it for the first time on stream after I beat Deluxe NDC, and honestly, after I played it for the first time, I thought, wow, this sucks. I never want to play this ever again. From that point onward, I would just attempt it on and off. And the first wall that I had to break was getting used to the drastically increased amount of keyboard inputs required right off the bat. Around this time, this was what an average HP run looked like. Coin farming had become so much harder compared to NDC Deluxe, and honestly, it was probably the most demotivating part of the entire night. I'd estimate that around this time, roughly 1 in 10 runs would even get to the first camera cycle and make it out of coin farming. And these coin farming deaths really never stop. Throughout the entire time I spent grinding this challenge, at best, 2 out of 3 runs were still dying at the very beginning of the night. Now, the reason why I found coin farming so challenging has to do with my muscle and keyboard memory. This is gonna become a reoccurring theme in this video, but Fredbear and especially Nightmare really mess with my keyboard hand. You see, this is how I would normally coin farm. I pull up the cameras and place my left index finger on the F key for the right vent in order to close it on BB and JJ. Once I pressed F, I would then keep my finger on the F key until I had to reopen the vent. It may look like characters just hit the doors the moment you shut them in UCN from a casual perspective, but in reality, characters actually take 0.5 seconds to leave. They also only have 2 timers, a kill timer and a leave timer. So if you happen to have a door closed and don't fill up the 0.5 second leave timer before the kill timer runs out, the animatronic will just phase through the door and jump scare you anyway. So UCN isn't like literally every other game where they either leave on a movement opportunity or just instantly bonk when the door is shut. So my coin farming muscle memory always told me to keep my finger on the F key in order to reopen the vent 0.5 seconds later. So what happens when in those 0.5 seconds, a character that requires my left index finger spawns? Well, at this point in the grind, my brain would just shit itself and I would die. Hopeless Pursuit has a ton of combos like this with your keyboard. Anytime you have to use the flashlight and Fredbear or Ballora on the left shows up, your ring finger is stuck between the Z and A keys. Anytime that you have to close the front vent and use the silent ventilation, your middle finger is stuck between the W and 2 keys. And if literally any of these things happen, your index finger is stuck between the 3, E, D, C, and F keys. This is why characters like OMC and Lolbit are now ranked as some of the hardest characters in the game, despite never receiving any direct buffs. On the rare runs that did get past coin farming, I noticed an immediate problem around the 30-second mark, and that was the L-chip and Afton combo. Even though I had rebound Lolbit to Q and E, I still had my L-chip add skip bind as enter like in the default game. I considered my movement to the enter key on my keyboard pretty fast, but I guess it wasn't fast enough, as whenever a door character spawned right as an ad appeared, I would usually fall apart, and it's pretty easy to see why. I have a full-size keyboard, so whenever I had to move my hand back from the enter key all the way to W, A, S, and D, it was pretty common for me to misplace my hand and hit the wrong key. And when that door character is someone like Afton, who only gives about 1.1 seconds to react, missing my keyboard hand would usually result in death. So at this point, I finally decided to bite the bullet and rebind L-chip's add skip to left shift. Now I had a keyboard configuration that no matter what animatronic appeared, my hand would never leave the left side of the keyboard, and I had access to all crucial keys at all times. Though it's obviously much better ergonomically to have left shift as your L-chip key, man, it was really hard to break that muscle memory for enter. I had played so much vanilla UCN and up to this point used Enter and Deluxe, so I was still very used to Enter. And every time I saw that ad flash, I had to restrain my arm from going all the way over to the Enter key. After about 1.5 days, I had finally managed to get comfortable with my new keybinds through sheer brute force. And I even worked my way up to a 1 AM PB. Though getting a 1 AM personal best was kind of misleading. For one, the 12 AM hour is significantly easier than every other hour in both chem cycles and office cycles. For the first 2 cycles, Rockstar Bonnie usually isn't even present, and during office cycles, you don't have to pay Rockstar Freddy and the mini arenas aren't even here yet. And just to get to 1 AM, it had taken me almost 4 days, and honestly, I thought at this point, I should just do this challenge and video in the background. I'll do some easier challenges for some filler, and slowly but surely work my way up second by second in HP. But it was then that a real life event would change how I thought about pretty much everything. One of my most frequently asked questions on this channel is how I got my name and avatar. For one, I'm not a furry. Here's a chart of how I got to my current profile picture. It spawned off of the Doge meme, but that's not the point here. I want to talk about how I got the name The Bones 5. When I was back in high school, I wanted to enter in a competitive Super Smash Bros. Ultimate tournament, and I needed a tag to go by. I wanted something that was cool, simple, and unique, since my previous tag was literally just my real name with some numbers at the end. And while that works for some people, I thought about my loved ones, people that are special to me, and that's when it hit me. My dog's name is Bones, so I'll be The Bones. I needed a number to make it stick, so I chose 5, the number of friends in my longest standing friend group. And that was that. Everyone loved my gamer tag, and a lot of people liked it so much that Bones became my real life nickname. So why am I telling you guys this now? It seems kind of out of place. Well, in my videos, I like to make them more than just gaming challenge videos. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that I like to get pretty personal with you guys, and talk about the mental and physical challenges that whatever I'm doing gave me, not just playing the game. But I truly wasn't and never could be ready for what was about to happen. On December 23rd of 2024, Bones passed away.
Hey guys, for those who don't know why I'm sitting outside instead of my room, when I cover a bit heavier topics, I like to go here. This is the Tree of Life, if you haven't seen it in the FNAF block video already. I like to go here so I'm not just like sitting in my room recording. I feel like that's a little dull sometimes. I don't have the motorcycle here like last time because it's too cold to even start it, much less ride it. So we're just sitting on the ground. It's better than the basement. Bones, more than anything, he was a lover. Like, you could say he'd be a really bad security dog because he just loved everyone. He didn't care who you were, where you came from, what you smelled like. No matter who you were, the second you entered the house, he'd be all over you. I spent my entire like conscious life with Bones. We got him when I was like 4 years old, and I wasn't really, you know, sentient before then. Throughout like my entire life, Bones was always there for me, and he was part of like our entire family. My mom, she'd keep him company when I was at school, my dad was at work. He'd watch YouTube with my dad when we were about to go to sleep. And he helped me grow up. He was there through every stage of my life, truly. And when Bones passed, I felt a kind of pain that I really have never felt before. I've never lost anyone close to me before, ever, actually. And I had this like almost hollow feeling that I wasn't used to ever feeling before. Bones, he went out with dignity. Like, we had to put him down because he had lost his sight, and he had already lost his hearing and was losing his smell. But his physical body could have gone on for probably a few more years. And I was angry because I felt like he was ripped away from us. If his eyes didn't go, if his senses didn't go, he'd still be here. I felt like cheated that he had gone in the way that he did. And after that happened, I lost motivation for pretty much like everything in my life. It was rough. But deep down, I still had this one burning desire. I try to be as transparent as I can with you guys in these videos. I think it makes them a lot better. And if I'm gonna be completely honest, the real reason that I made this video, or wanted to make this video, was kind of selfish. Since I've started YouTube, I've always seen a ton of comments in my sections and other people's comment sections comparing me to the other big FNAF challenge YouTubers. Like, who's better, who's more insane, who does the crazier challenges, you know? And I wanted this video to be inarguable evidence that I was like the best challenge YouTuber. Like I do the hardest challenges, right? But after Bones passed away, all this like internet, social media stuff, comparing about who's better at what, like none of it mattered at all. It all seemed so utterly meaningless, right? I didn't care if it was me or Chicken Ninja or Spiff or whoever the comments are talking about. No, I was gonna beat this challenge for an entirely different reason. I wanted to honor my friend, my brother, the entire reason this channel exists, my childhood best friend, right? And I wasn't gonna do that through some lame, is it possible to beat this without this, you know, just like every other video. I wanted to do something really, really important and meaningful. And something that really meant something to me and a lot of other people, you know? And this was when I decided I am going to literally put everything I have and I am going to beat Hopeless Pursuit so I can immortalize Bones' name in the FNAF community forever. It's not a question anymore.
This challenge had originally started as a background project, one of pride. I wanted to prove that I was the best FNAF challenge YouTuber in terms of skill. But now, that all felt so utterly meaningless. But even though my original goal was gone, my motivation ran deeper than anything I had ever done before. To those of you who wanted to see the true gauntlet or any other video, I'm sorry. In order for me to feel like I had honored Bones properly, it had to be the hardest challenge that I was capable of doing. I had to beat Hopeless Pursuit here and now, not for a selfish and prideful reason, but for Bones. Previously, I had been playing Hopeless Pursuit on and off, but this was the day that I swore I was going to dedicate everything that I had to completing Hopeless Pursuit. From this day forward until I completed HP, I would play for every single day for as long as possible. If you don't know from previous videos, I'm currently a full-time college student studying computer science, but I still had about half of my winter break left over, meaning that I could play significantly more per day than if I was at school. If there was one thing that I did have, it was time. My break ended on January 19th, so I had 28 days to complete Hopeless Pursuit. Now starting on December 23rd, my journey truly began. For almost this entire section in these first few days, you'll notice that my usual face cam is now a hand cam instead. And I'll be completely honest with you guys, the days after Bones' passing, I would just break down sometimes. And I didn't really want to see that looking back on these recordings. The face cam would return later, just when I was a bit more emotionally stable. The day of Bones' passing, I had a much different mental state than usual. Usually, I tend to get very annoyed and angry with these kinds of games pretty quickly. But after such a life-altering event, it was so hard to get angry at petty Hopeless Pursuit deaths, which was kind of the inspiration for the new Bones redesign for this video. When something like this happens, you can't really feel anything else properly for a while. Almost immediately, I had jumped up from my personal best around 1 AM flat to a 142. Unfortunately, I didn't record a lot of these super early personal bests because I knew that I wasn't gonna fluke the entire night. But from some of the footage history, I can tell that these personal bests were accurate. Christmas Eve and Christmas Day came and went. Both days I spent playing HP with no progress, but this was to be expected. 1 AM in Hopeless Pursuit is known as one of the biggest walls in max modes, as 12 AM is kind of a tutorial hour, with some key components missing from cam and office cycles. But once you hit 1 AM and get past it, it's just repeating that hour for the rest of the night. Even though I did have a 149 PB, it's worth noting that this PB wasn't exactly perfect. You see, there are 3 key metrics that you always need to keep up throughout any Hopeless Pursuit run. These are your power, coins, and cycle time. Power is the most obvious. If you leave a door closed for too long, which trust me is very easy to do, or miss a me-bird on any of the office cycles, you probably won't have enough power to finish the night. We'll talk more about coins later on, but right now I wasn't really too concerned with them as plushies didn't really matter at this point. The first plushie animatronic would kill at 2 AM if I didn't buy their plushie, and I hadn't even gotten there yet. However, the most determining factor in getting a new personal best is your cycle time. Remember that from earlier, Pyrus cycles kinda script out when you should do cam and office cycles in HP. So if you're too slow on a cam or office cycle, you're going to bleed a few seconds and fall off cycle. When this happens, there are a few characters that can punish you for it. Mainly Toy Freddy, the ducked characters, and Withered Chica and Mangle in the vents. As I played more and more, I began to notice a pattern in my runs. The wall was specifically at the 56 to 111 cycle, the first hour transition. I would almost never get past this specific cycle in the run. And out of the first 4 days of attempts, I only made it there on power pace and without bleeding any cycle time once. I was so panicked once it happened that I ended up messing up the next cycle to a mistake with Phantom Mangle. The reason that this cycle was so problematic was because it was an extremely tight cam cycle followed by the first proper office cycle of the night. The hardest office cycle in the 12 AM hour is around 35 seconds, as it's the first time that we have to click Me-bird and Rockstar Foxy while also using the heater to deal with Nightmare Chica. But here, we don't have the mini arenas, Bonnet, or Rockstar Freddy active, so there's significantly less to deal with. Now, at 106, we drop the cameras to a full office cycle that will require the circle or wall methods we talked about earlier. But trying to learn these methods on the fly was extremely difficult. Usually, I just ended up going in some random order and trying to click everything on screen, which most of the time resulted in a Nightmarionette death. And if I didn't, I would bleed tons of time and wouldn't open the cameras anywhere near the 11-second mark. Mentally, this was a huge struggle, because it truly felt like every run that I got to this cycle was just doomed instantly. There was no way to practice for this specific cycle without getting a run that makes it here. And remember, the camera cycle before it is extremely precise. Usually, you're within 1 to 2 seconds of a Toy Freddy game over. At one point, I did consider trying to make some sort of practice mod, like how PXH Ghost did all the way back when I beat Ryan Got All challenges for the first time. But that felt kind of cheap. If all of the Hopeless Pursuit victors before me did it in this way, then I was going to learn this way too. So I kept trying and trying with the mentality that if I could just get through this one cycle, I could get through the night. As December 26th passed, I started to realize something. If I wanted to practice the 105 office cycle more, I needed to get as many runs there as possible, even if it meant not having good coins or good power when I got there. I could worry about coins and power later. For now, I just needed better speed and aim to survive. So I decided to not coin farm nearly as hard at the beginning of the night, as coin farming still made up most of my deaths. This drastically boosted the number of runs that were getting to the cycle of death, and I even had a few runs past it, albeit while bleeding a lot of cycle time. Finally, on day 6, I managed to get a flat 2 AM personal best. Unfortunately, this was off recording, so I can't show you guys, but from memory, I died because I didn't buy the plushie, since I wasn't really focused on getting past 2 AM, just getting to it. So in 6 days, we've managed to march from 142 to 2 minutes. If anything, that should tell you how much harder HP is than anything I've done before. For reference, I was already done with FNAF Lock once I had hit day 6.
It has been 6 days!
And I was complete garbage at FNAF back then relative to how I am now. Relatively speaking, getting to 2 AM on Hopeless Pursuit with good power pace was already harder than anything that I had ever done in FNAF by a mile. So yes, that does mean just getting 2 AM on Hopeless Pursuit is harder than Deluxe NDC, and it's not close. So now, there was nothing left to do but push forward. For the next few days, progress was still extremely slow. Every time that I would get a new personal best, it would only be a small march forward by a few seconds. And honestly, this was pretty discouraging. If I was progressing at a rate of 8 seconds per day on a good day, there was no way that I was going to beat HP by the 19th. I still wasn't very consistent with the 105 office cycle, but there were some runs that would occasionally get past it. But as I was having a conversation with my mom at dinner about the grind, she brought up a good point. Also, she comments on all my videos, "Love you mom, we're doing this for bones." She said that even though I hadn't been improving my main personal best that much, my consistency was still getting better day by day. Slowly but surely, I had more and more runs that were creeping into the 130 to 140 range. The new year came and went, and I had only progressed about 8 seconds overall. But thankfully, my mental state had gotten a bit better since Bones' passing. Before, I had had a lot of trouble sleeping just thinking about him, and with how much that I was playing per day, I'm sure that I was getting fatigued due to a lack of sleep. It was looking pretty bad deadline-wise, until January 2nd. I don't know what was different about this day, but when I started up runs, it was like I was playing an entirely different game.
Such men are dangerous.
I don't know if it was good luck from Bones or what, but in one day, I managed to jump my PB by nearly a full minute. And for the first time, I finally felt a bit of relief in the speed of my progress. It had taken me 11 days to get to 303, meaning that if I kept this pace, I should be able to easily get HP done by the 19th. So now that I had a personal best that was halfway through the night, I was pretty optimistic and I continued my grind. A reoccurring concept in almost all forms of media is the yin and yang, the idea of a balance between light and dark. They say that the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. Well, that 303 run must have been a really bright light because man, I've never had a bigger wall than 3 minutes and 3 seconds on Hopeless Pursuit. When I first got my 303 personal best, I finally felt like I had made some decent progress for once. If I could start getting consistent 3 AMs, the rest of the night shouldn't be that bad. But I think I had mentally tricked myself into thinking this 303 was a lot better than it actually was. You see, it's one thing to get a 303. It's an entirely different thing to get a 303 that's on cycle, on power pace, and on coin pace. Essentially, there's a very big gap between a 303 that could potentially win the night and a 303 where you barely crawled your way to 3 AM. And in this run, I had horrible power, horrible coins, and I was nearly 5 seconds off cycle. I didn't know this at the time, but that 303 personal best would haunt me for the next 6 days. Now that I knew I was capable of surviving this long into the night, I wanted to ensure that the next time I got to 3 AM, I could keep going as far as possible, which means having good coins, good power, and good cycle time. Now, in the strategy portion, I never really mentioned these, because power and cycle time are both pretty intuitive. To have good power, just make sure you don't miss any me birds and don't forget any closed doors. It sounds easy enough, but oftentimes I would look at the usage bar while in the cams and notice, hey, that's not what the power gen fan and cams look like. Then I'd end up closing and opening every single door to find which one was shut and lose like half my power doing it. It's just one of those keyboard torture things that you have to adjust to. Cycle time is pretty self-explanatory, you just have to be fast. Interestingly though, out of these 3 metrics, the hardest isn't cycle time or power. The hardest is actually coins. In base NDC, you barely even notice coins as a threat. You just farm like 20 at the beginning, then naturally you'll earn enough throughout the night that you'll always be able to afford plushies. However, in Hopeless Pursuit, coins are a lot more strict. Real quick, let's talk about how absurdly rich you need to be in Hopeless Pursuit. So all 3 plushies cost 60 Faz coins each for a total of 180 coins. And Rockstar Freddy's greedy ass literally never stops asking for coins. So we're paying him 4 times per hour starting at 1 AM. 4 times 5 times 5 is 100, so we need to get 280 coins total throughout the entire night to win. Remember that plushies now cost 60 whole coins to buy, and your coins are capped at 70. You'd think that the increased frequency of door characters would make up for this, since every time a door character hits a door, you're awarded a coin. But there's a strange quirk with both Deluxe and Vanilla UCN. Coins are only awarded when you block door characters separately. For example, let's say Nightmare spawns at the right door and Ballora spawns with him. When you shut the door, you'll hear 2 bonks right away, or one loud bonk indicating that they both left, but you'll only be awarded with 1 coin. The reason that this happens is because the sound file of the bonk ending is actually what gives you your coin. So when a second sound cue interrupts that first sound cue, you'll only get 1 coin for both sound cues. This isn't really a problem in Vanilla UCN or normal Deluxe, because door characters don't spawn that often. But in Hopeless Pursuit, with characters like Nightmare that can spawn every 2 seconds, there's bound to be some door overlaps. Because of stuff like this, you have to farm a ton more coins at the beginning of the night to compensate. By 13 seconds, you want to have about 24 to 27 coins. Then, after you finish the first mini cam cycle, you want to keep farming so that you have 40 coins by 26 seconds. This adds a ton more difficulty to the beginning of the night, but the pain with coins doesn't end there. If you've played through the first hour of the night correctly, you should be at about 64 to 67 Faz coins on the hour change. If you've done everything right, during the next cam cycle, you're going to hit the coin cap of 70 coins. Which means that on top of being the tightest camera and office cycle on the hour change, we now have to buy a plushie in this cycle. So we'll now have to spend roughly an extra 3/4 of a second in the cameras, which means the super ultra evil office cycle at 105 is now even stricter. In earlier runs, I would usually just buy the plushie on the 111 camera cycle, since that camera cycle gives you a lot more time than the hour change one. But if you're actually intent on beating the full night, buying the plushie here would mean that you wouldn't have enough coins at 5 AM for the last plushie, and you could suffer the dreaded 559 death. And this has actually happened. Sero, the third Hopeless Pursuit victor, ended up not having enough coins for the 5 AM plushie and died at 559. Even though I didn't expect to get that far from 3 AM, I wasn't going to take any chances, so I made sure to always buy this plushie on the first cycle. I also strangely started to have a lot more trouble with Chica, specifically on the 144 interval. There's no way. There's no way. This would usually be a music change interval if Chica wasn't desynced, but this interval managed to match up perfectly with the part of the Pots and Pans audio file that was completely silent. So you either had to listen for a really long time or just take the gamble. This made the 1 AM hour change and the 144 my biggest choke points in the night. And when I got back to attempts on the 3rd of January, it was like the wall had reformed and I just couldn't get past 1 AM anymore. I thought that eventually this would pass. If I kept playing, I'd eventually get consistent with it. So January 4th went by, then the 5th, marking 2 weeks straight that I had been playing HP every single day. And now it was really starting to wear on me. Every single day I woke up knowing that I had to play Hopeless Pursuit for pretty much the entire day. Otherwise, I felt like I wasn't trying my hardest to honor Bones' memory. It was at this point that I also started to feel some physical injuries as well. I began to develop blisters on my mouse hand, on my ring and pinky from gripping the mouse, and my shoulders started to get tired faster from holding out my hands on the mouse and keyboard. At this point, I started to get really anxious that I wasn't going to make the deadline anymore. Beating HP by January 19th sure sounded doable when I had first gotten the 303, but now that 4 whole days had passed with no progress, I wasn't so sure. I really needed this done by the deadline to have any hopes of getting the video out in a realistic time span. So I began to alter my daily routine in order to give myself more time to play HP. I would only eat 2 meals a day, and I began working out for 1 hour every day rather than 3 hours 3 times a week. That way I could at least have some form of break in between gameplay. And now I was genuinely wondering, was this the right choice? I'm gonna let you guys in on some insider information for being a gaming challenge YouTuber. If you want to get as many views as possible, you have to find a challenge that is really easy to do, but sounds really hard. If you want proof of this, look no further than my own channel. My most popular video is beating FNAF 4 without using the doors, despite this being the easiest FNAF challenge that I have ever done. All of the "is it possible to beat this without this" videos are like this. And I was kinda shaken up after realizing that I wasn't gonna hit my proper upload deadline. By the 2-week mark on any normal video, I would have already beaten the challenge and had the script fully complete, but here, all I had was a 3 AM at best with no signs of progression. I was thinking back to the earlier phases of my channel, the FNAF lock days, where Toy Bonnie was the hardest enemy on this channel, and now it was just this. I guess you could say this had shown how far I had come. FNAF Lock was literally nothing now in terms of skill. But I don't know, in a strange way, I kinda missed it. Ultimately though, I had to remember that I wasn't doing this for a successful video. Sure, it would be nice if the video did well. I really wanted this video to be the one that defines my channel from here on out, so liking, commenting, or subscribing would mean the world to me. But in the end, this video was to honor Bones, and it had to be special. With that mentality, I kept pushing on, trying to scale this impossibly tall personal best wall. I didn't realize at the time, but the reason that I was stuck was buying the plushie at the 056 cycle. And I'm sure my consistency had been getting better, but my brain was still so focused on that HP best time number that stared me in the face every time I wanted to start another game. On January 7th, 16 days in, I still hadn't scaled the wall. But I had hope as I was finally getting some improvement in my average run. Having a high personal best is one thing, because that's just one run out of many. But getting a higher average run means that a personal best is right around the corner. And on January 8th, 17 days into my HP streak, this happened.
Oh, the wall has been broken. Holy f***. By 3 seconds, the wall has been broken.
For 6 days, I fought tooth and nail, playing every day with all I had for 3 seconds. And though it may seem like a small step, this was huge. My average run past coin farming was now a late 1 AM to early 2 AM. Now I had so many more chances to get up to that 3 AM. And this wasn't just another fluke. This was proof that I could consistently reach 3 AM. I managed to once again reach 3 AM with a 312 on that same day.
Wow.
The others are like animals.
On cycle 2.
Things might not have been looking good deadline-wise, but at least I finally had a fighting chance to actually beat the mode. After finally breaking the 303 wall, I was in good spirits. And the next day, I proved it, jumping all the way from 312 to 348 with another fluke. Once again, this was another big jump in personal bests, but this time I knew what to expect. I knew that for the next day or two, I probably wasn't going to get any personal bests as I had to work my way back up from the fluke that I had just gotten. So I kept grinding away, getting more and more runs into that mid 2 to low 3 AM range. January 10th and 11th passed with no progress, which meant that I probably wasn't going to hit the deadline. And I was starting to realize that the stress of beating HP by January 19th was just going to make me play worse. At the pace I was at, I wasn't going to make it by then, and I think I just had to accept that. And then everything changed.
Ooh, crap. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
442, a fluke by nearly a full in-game hour. This was getting scary. Not only did I have really good power up until the very end, I had bought both the first and second plushie at the correct times, and I had good coin pace. Even with insane nerves, I had only bled about a second in cycle time, and ultimately I died to a mistake, not to getting checked by one of the cycle characters. This run had a very real possibility of beating the knight. You have to understand that at this point, I couldn't even imagine actually beating the knight. It's hard to quantify in a video like this how much time that I had spent at this point. This was day 23 of playing Hopeless Pursuit every single day in a row. And remember, the majority of runs were still just dying at coin farming over and over again, and every day I had to spend about 20 minutes warming up just to get absolutely nowhere. But this was a shock. The fact that I was legitimately in range of beating the knight, the fact that I could actually do this, I genuinely couldn't believe it. I could do this for bones. So you're probably wondering, these past 2 personal bests that I've gotten were followed by massive walls. Would this one be the same? Would I have to wait a whole nother week and fight for a few more seconds?
Please deposit 5 coins. Please thank you for depositing 5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins.
Let's see how many pieces I can cut you into.
January 16th, day 25. The Bones 5 has reached 5 AM on Hopeless Pursuit. That 442 wasn't a fluke. Just 2 days later, I had broken the 5 AM barrier for the first time. On any other FNAF challenge, this would be a soul-crushing failure, but on Hopeless Pursuit, this was a massive step forward. And now, in a matter of days, that deadline was looking reasonable. That 5 AM run had good power and good coins. I only ended up losing because of poor cycle time and a mistake with Phantom Mangle. I had barely missed the camera button to despawn her, and she had pulled down my camera monitor. Panicked, I tried to see what I had to do in the office, and I didn't notice Scrap Baby looking up at me. At this point, we were on day 25, January 16th. I had 3 days left to beat the night before I had to go back to college. I knew that going back to college, adjusting to a new setup, and beating it there would delay this video more than it already had been. But this personal best may have also led to my greatest mental downfall. When I was still stuck on the walls of 303 and 348, I had come to terms with the fact that I probably wasn't going to be able to beat the night on time, and that I would have to beat it at college. But now it was do or die. I needed to beat it here. And that activated one of Hopeless Pursuit's biggest strengths, nerves. I haven't really talked about nerves up until this point, but for every single personal best I would get on HP, I would get extremely nervous. This usually resulted in a bit of brain fog when dealing with keyboard heavy characters, and a ton of shakes on my mouse hand, which obviously didn't help with aiming. Personal best nerves are one thing, but 5 AM nerves are an entirely different beast. I would say that I built up pretty good nerve control with how many challenges I've done. Cuphead No Hit and Dark Souls No Death SL1 both had difficult final bosses at the end of hour or even multi-hour long runs in the case of Dark Souls. I had beaten all of the FNAC 3 max modes, which are known for testing your nerves and aim, and I had done long-term FNAF challenges like the Gauntlet, FNAF Lock, and the 6-hour real-time challenge, all of which give you crazy nerves. But Hopeless Pursuit nerves are different, and I think the game knows how nervous you're going to be. You see, the game pulls a very clever trick on you once you reach 5 AM. If you remember earlier when we were talking about the ducts and vents for the first time, you'll see that every character has been given a new and distinct icon to make it easier to see who's who. Well, once 5 AM hits, the icons in the ducts and vents will revert back to their original vanilla forms, along with the retextured Golden Freddy. If you take away nerves, this doesn't affect your gameplay at all. Remember, the ducts and HP are just an aim test. You just change the lure around and you don't really have to think about it at all. And the vent icons are still very distinct. But what this change does is that it lets you know it is 5 AM and you can't ignore it. You can't just imagine it's an earlier hour. And wow, it does its job well. I feel like now is also a good time to mention, my opinions on difficult characters had switched drastically now that I'd gotten so much better at HP. If we look at the list of tier 1s that I had previously made, you'd see that I put a lot of weight on aim-based characters. In fact, the entire top 4 were all aim-based. But now, I felt like that had changed. Night Marionette and Office Cycles as a whole weren't really that difficult for me aim-wise, since I had now fully mastered the circle method. But keyboard characters were an entirely different story. Door characters, OMC, and Lolbit were all giving me a lot of trouble, especially in the later hours where I was known to choke. Let's take an example of an office cycle in this clip here. This isn't particularly far into the night, but it's a good example. Now, whenever I would play HP, I'd always have a small internal cue in the back of my brain telling me which characters I had to prioritize and deal with first. In this specific instance, characters like OMC and especially Lolbit overloaded my queue, and I kind of forgot about Nightmare until the very end. Then I wasn't fast enough to get rid of Lolbit and OMC to deal with Nightmare. And nerves really only amplify this. If I could control my nerves, Hopeless Pursuit was in reach. I ended up getting that 503 pretty late in the day on the 16th, so I just decided to prepare for tomorrow as the day that I should beat it instead of attempting more runs later into the night. Generally, the late morning to early afternoon were the best hours for playtime, most likely because I was already warmed up and not quite fatigued yet from multiple hours of playing throughout the day. Earlier during the 303 wall section, I had mentioned how I started to develop blisters on my hands from playing so much. Usually, these blisters would fade as I slept, then when I woke up, my hands would be healed enough to play for the first few hours of the day, then the wounds would start to irritate again. Realistically, this probably wasn't a good approach. Just taking one day off could have made a world of a difference, but I was so set on the mindset of if I take a day off, I am not honoring bones, and then I just couldn't. So after I had my warm-ups for the day, I started my runs. At this point, it was the 17th of January, and I had put a lot of pressure on myself to beat Hopeless Pursuit on this specific day. Every day of my winter break, I had spent either editing the previous video, then playing Hopeless Pursuit every single day. If I could beat HP today, I'd at least have 2 days where I could finally take a break. And slowly but surely, it was looking that way. I had bought the first plushie on time with 10 coins left over. The best possible scenario. I completed the cycle of death without much struggle, losing no cycle time. I was able to hear the 144 Chica and got past that. Then down went 2 AM and then 3 AM. The moment I bought the second plushie, nerves began to kick on, but I kept playing. I passed 4 AM on cycle, and with good power. In fact, I wasn't just on power pace, I was 6% ahead of it. I maintained cycle time all throughout 4 AM, and for the first time ever, I entered 5 AM on cycle. During the 503 personal best, I was around 5 seconds off cycle. So this was a drastic improvement. I almost got caught by Phantom Balloon Boy right as the hour changed, but I reacted quickly. For the first time, I actually saw the visual changes. It shook me to my core. My body was freezing up, I was shaking, but I was still on cycle. And I was still playing. This was it. This was going to be it. This was what I was fighting for this whole time. Most players get 2 or 3 5 AMs before winning. It's realistic. The past month that I had spent fighting, day in and day out, it all built up to this. Everything I had fought for, to honor bones, it was perfect. I was thinking to myself, this would be narratively perfect for the video. I was going to be free. It was finally going to be over. But as I opened the cameras for the 11-second cam cycle, all of my nerves went away, and I realized this was real life. I am not in a movie, this isn't a written story, because I only have 40 coins, and Nightmare Bonnie, he wants 60. By the time I had paid Rockstar Freddy at the next office cycle, it hit me. In order to be on pace to win with coins, you need to have about 35 to 40 when the hour changes, but I only had 38. And it was almost halfway through the hour. No matter how well I played, this run was doomed. When I realized what was going on, I think my body just instinctively gave up. I died from some keyboard mistake, but that really, at the core, wasn't the reason. I think I just didn't want to have a 559 death so badly that I internally just threw the game away. So what went wrong? How did I lose so many coins? When I bought the first plushie, I had 10 coins left over, which is the literal best case scenario. But between the hours of 1 AM to 3 AM, I had so many door character overlaps and lost so many potential coins. Not only did the vent characters clump up a lot, but I also have this weird habit where I always close Freddy's door right when Nightmare Fredbear spawns, which takes care of both of them with one door close. I always try to naturally be very power efficient when I play. And this is the more power efficient move, but every time that I did it, I'd lose one potential coin that I could get from blocking them off separately. And doing this throughout these first 2 hours led me to reaching the 311 cam cycle and not having enough to buy the second plushie on time. Instead, I had to buy it on the 3rd cycle of the hour, which is normally when you'd buy the 5 AM plushie. And from here, I didn't really have a way of getting more coins. So I ended up not having enough by the end. I was so close, but at the same time, I was so far. And the worst part was that I really didn't know what to do. I had coin farmed as hard as I could at the beginning of the night, and clearly it had worked out. I had as many coins as possible by the first plushie, but I was losing so many potential coins naturally over time. Well, at least we know one thing. Gameplay-wise, I am now skilled enough to survive the entire night. The issue is no longer speed. So what can we do to get more coins midway through the night? Well, we have two options here. We can either learn some vent character intervals, or find some way to coin farm midway through the night. In the middle of the night, the most common way that I found I would lose potential coins is from the vent characters bunching up, then closing the vent on all of them at once when I heard an entered sound cue or saw Molten Freddy on the cameras. To ensure that we block all three of these characters separately and get as many coins as possible, we could close the front vent exactly when the three of them arrive individually. Springtrap will always appear every 37 seconds, Molten Freddy will always appear every 27 seconds, and Entered will always appear every 19 seconds. Honestly though, I didn't want to have to track intervals on top of everything else that I was already dealing with in HP. I had a hard time tracking Freddy in NDC, and he was only on 50-second intervals, so this option was out of the question. So what else can we do?
Please deposit 5 coins. Please deposit 5 coins.
That's right. Do you remember that extremely chaotic first 20 seconds of the game where we coin farm? What if we did that mid-office cycle? Not only do you look super cool when you do this, it's actually, in my opinion, the best way to get back on coin pace. I noticed that now that I was getting consistently deep runs, my speed in the cameras was getting a lot better, and oftentimes I'd have a bit of spare time left over on the 122 and 222 office cycles. So why not use some of that time to farm a few coins and get back on pace? And this seemed to work. Any runs that got past both coin farming office cycles always had good coins. So I had the skill to survive until the end, and now I had a way to get good coins, power, and cycle time. All I had to do was actually do it. I had 2 days left until the deadline, so I had to make it happen. But this deadline, man, it just broke my spirit. Knowing that I only had 2 days left amplified the nerves of any run that got decently far tenfold. I had plenty of 4 AM runs, but any run that I had past the second plushie would just instantly die to nerves. And honestly, I'm convinced that if I wasn't a YouTuber and the livelihood of my channel wasn't on the line, I would have beaten Hopeless Pursuit a lot sooner, or at least on good runs gotten significantly less nervous. The second to last day came and went, and I awoke on the final day, January 19th. When I woke up, I went downstairs to start up runs, and I had a feeling today will be the day, just because it's the last day, because it would be cinematic, because it would be right. But this is real life. Once again, I was forced to realize that no, I really can't beat it today. I had spent almost all the time that I had the past 2 days on Hopeless Pursuit, and mentally, physically, I just couldn't do it. I had stressed earlier how bad the 303 wall was for my mental state, but the final wall of actually beating the night was on an entirely different level. I was forced to accept the fact that this video is going to take a long time, and just trust that my audience will be patient. And if you've watched this far into the video, it shows that you were, and I cannot thank you enough. At this point, I was forced to just cut my losses and realize that I would have to beat it at college. Being back in the college dorm, I was both nervous and relieved. For one, the deadline didn't really exist anymore. I had failed to meet it, so now I was just wondering which day it was going to happen. My biggest fear was that I wasn't going to be able to adjust to a new setup, and that my skill wouldn't transfer very well. But thankfully, I was able to prove that wrong on the very same day, as I managed to get a 4 AM at the college setup. I knew that I had retained my skill. Now all I had to do was pick up where I left off. On the 21st, I crossed over the 30-day mark for total days of playtime that I had spent in a row, and overall didn't make much progress. However, on the 22nd, I had finally worked back up and got my third 5 AM run. It had been 5 days since the last run to 5 AM, which seemed scary at first. Was every 5 AM run going to take 5 days to achieve? Well, a few hours later, I was on track to proving that wrong. This was the classic fail of keyboard overloading and the queue system that I mentioned earlier getting messed up. The moment that I had pulled up the cameras, Nightmare had spawned. But I was visually focused on Orville being right at the duct entrance. And then Afton completely overwrote the idea of Nightmare in my queue and I ended up folding. My keyboard hand and mental state were just too shaky. But this did show one thing. I think that I was honestly better at my college dorm than at the home setup. It might have had to do with some nerdy stuff like the monitor distance or seat height, or honestly just the fact that I was forced to take breaks to go to class and do college stuff. But looking back at all my recent challenges, I'd beaten every single one here, so maybe I was just better acclimated to this setup. And the next day proved it. A fifth 5 AM, this time to Funtime Foxy. I was getting a 5 AM every single day, sometimes even multiple in one day, with all of them having good power and coins. I could feel that my skill was increasing, and maybe soon I could break the final wall. Day 33, January 24th was the first Friday of the semester, so I knew that I had to make it count, and off the bat, I did. Right after I had warmed up, I managed to get a 516, dying to Chica because I had forgotten to change the music on the previous cycle. This definitively proved that 5 AMs were no longer flukes. They were consistent, and the next one had potential to go the whole way. At this point, the wall was still 530, and it had held for 6 days. And I was really hoping that the next 5 AM would be the last.
No!
I always come back.
Oh my god, what? I opened that shit like 1 frame too early, bro.
As per usual with Hopeless Pursuit, every time a wall is broken, it can only be by a few seconds, no matter how far into the night we are. At long last, the 7-day 530 wall had fallen to a 540. Now, if you were listening closely, you might have been confused as to why I even died here. You can hear the vent door shut, and then Afton just kills me anyway. Well, would you believe me when I said that I opened this door 3 frames too early? That's right, pretty much the only thing standing between me and finally being done with this hell was 0.05 seconds. I'll say it now, Afton is the stupidest door character in Ultimate Custom Night. So remember earlier how I said that every door character leaves after 0.5 seconds with their door closed? That is true for every door character except for Afton. Afton instead has a timer that starts at 70 frames and counts down. Once that timer reaches 1, he'll check if the vent is closed, and if it isn't, he enters and jump scares you. When you're constantly being bombarded with door characters and HP, and literally all of them leave on this 0.5 second condition, Afton completely destroys this muscle memory. He seems like he's fast when you want him to be slow, and he's slow when you want him to be fast. But this specific death, this one wasn't just an ordinary keyboard overload death. This was different. You see, when I play HP, the motions that my hands make need to follow a rhythm of some sort. It's kind of like the classic pat your head and rub your stomach test, where you have to do 2 different things with your brain. So for me, when I'm clicking things with the mouse, I'm always going to sync my clicks with keyboard inputs. You can see it as early as coin farming. I always open the side vent as I click Helpy. So watch as my mouse slowly makes its way up to Rockstar Foxy's 5% power, then the moment I click that, my brain has to click the F key, and the vent is open. All that I had left in this run was 1 singular camera cycle, buying the last plushie, and that would be it. Even though I was upset about this fail, that wasn't even the first 5 AM of the day. If I was getting multiple 5 AMs per day, I knew that it wouldn't be too long until I had another chance. But would you believe it if I told you that wasn't even my worst fail in Hopeless Pursuit?
No!
You serious, bro? Oh my god, are you serious? A lot of people have asked me what my worst fail in FNAF is, and up until this point, I would have said the 550 during the 420 mode real-time challenge. For those who don't know, this past summer I made a video where I beat FNAF 1's 420 mode in real time, so it actually took 6 hours. And in that video, I ended up dying at 550, wasting 5 hours and 50 minutes of my life. When I first had this fail, I wondered, even if I got 559 on HP, the hardest challenge at the time, would this still be the worst? And I thought, yes, surely it was. It was a 5 hour and 50 minute fail. And I was wrong. The 6 hour fail may have cost me 5 hours of my life, but that challenge itself only took me 1 day. And this was day 33 of Hopeless Pursuit. The moment after this run happened, I was forced to go to class, which killed all my momentum for the rest of the day. And in my head, I was just repeating, why didn't you grab the guitar? Why didn't you grab the guitar? Why didn't you just grab the guitar? It was so easy, literally right there. The reason that I think I missed it was just due to nerves and finally reaching the last plushie. When I opened cams on the 541 cycle, the only thing that I was thinking of was buy the plushie, you better not forget to buy the plushie. But I had totally forgotten Rockstar Bonnie. And once I got to the end of the camera cycle, I just thought, you have to get out of the cameras as fast as possible so the masked characters don't kill you. Get out now. But I had just totally forgotten about the guitar. The rest of the day, I was still getting relatively consistent runs, but that 1 hour period right before I got the 554 was clearly the prime of the day, and ultimately, with 4 or 5 AMs that day, I couldn't close it out on day 33. Sunday, January 25th, 2025. I awoke and immediately got another 5 AM. No consistency was lost. This was the last day of the weekend, so if I had any time to finally close it out, it would be now. With how long that I had been playing, I'd estimate that I was around the 100-hour mark. I had spent the past month straight playing Hopeless Pursuit. It had been a full month since Bones had passed away. I had suffered through mental walls and physical ones. And at 2:45 PM, I gave Hopeless Pursuit one more try.
Oh my god, I beat Hopeless Pursuit. Oh my... Oh my god, I beat Hopeless Pursuit. Oh my god, I beat Hopeless Pursuit. Oh.
I had finally done it. After a month straight of playing no video games except for UCN Deluxe and Hopeless Pursuit every single day in a row, I had finally completed Hopeless Pursuit. I can't even put into words the feeling of pure relief that I had on this day. I just went outside and walked for almost 2 hours straight. Everything felt amazing. And I want to give a huge thank you again to Firefuel for helping me to get this far, and teaching me everything about this game. So, was that it? Was this really the end? Had I reached the eternal peak of my channel? I thought so. I began scripting this video and editing it for the next month. All throughout January and into February, that was the narrative that I was going to go with. That it was finally over and I could rest. But it wasn't all celebration. Throughout this whole video, I referred to Hopeless Pursuit as the hardest FNAF challenge ever. But that actually isn't true. Hopeless Pursuit was the hardest FNAF challenge when I started practicing for this video, all the way back when I started Vanilla UCN. And since then, it had moved one spot down, dethroned by Ultimatum. At first, this didn't bother me. Ultimatum is the max mode of UCN Recode, a different mod of UCN, and victors of both Ultimatum and Hopeless Pursuit say that they're roughly equal in difficulty, but Ultimatum just barely beats Hopeless Pursuit out. And as I was scripting and editing this video, as the weeks passed, the thoughts in the back of my mind slowly crept up louder and louder. You didn't beat the hardest FNAF challenge, you lied in the title, you didn't honor Bones. And eventually I couldn't ignore it any longer. As of writing this script, I have no idea when this video is going to come out. It's already been far longer than it should be, but I was willing to take as long as I needed in order to truly honor Bones. So where do we go from here? Are we going to have to learn a whole new game? Then the HP level max mode of that game? No. I'm not going to resort to Ultimatum. If I want to honor Bones, I'm not going to beat the top one, I'm going to surpass it. If Hopeless Pursuit isn't harder than Ultimatum, then I'm going to make it harder than Ultimatum. This is Hopeless Pursuit Pure Greed.
5 points. 5 points.
That's right, if Hopeless Pursuit isn't the number one, then I'll take it beyond number one with self-imposed challenges. In NDC Deluxe, there is a challenge known as Pure Greed, where you have to save enough coins throughout the night to not only buy the 3 plushies to survive, but also buy the death coin and have the full 99 coins left over when you complete the night.
5 points. Please deposit 5.
Jesus, dude. Pure Greed is already very difficult on NDC Deluxe, but no one had even thought of the next step up until now. Let me introduce Hopeless Greed. Remember how throughout the 5 AM wall, the main issue was always not having enough coins, and when I finally did beat Hopeless Pursuit, even with the coin farming mid-office cycle, I only won with 12 coins. Well now, we're going to win with the death coin bought and the max coins of 70. Hopeless Greed takes Hopeless Pursuit and turns up the heat on every area of the night. Keyboard chaos is now absolutely insane, because you have to coin farm on every office cycle, sometimes even double maskless coin farms on Meebird cycles. Sometimes the keyboard chaos is so bad that you literally just can't survive. In this clip, I had Fredbear, Nightmare, BB from the camera flip, OMC, and Lolbit. So what do you think the correct sequence of inputs is here? Well, it's actually none of these keys. It's the escape key so you can quit the f***ing night. To put this into perspective, when I was first starting out, I couldn't even do a Meebird office cycle at 1 AM. Now, we're doing a full Meebird office cycle so fast that we have enough time to pull up the cameras twice to get 4 more coins. You also now have to be much faster compared to normal Hopeless Pursuit. Using the cameras to farm coins in office cycles makes the masked characters angry, and they'll spawn really early in camera cycles, meaning you'll have to be extremely fast in your camera cycles so their kill timer doesn't run out and you die. So you'll need better speed and aim. Combining all of this, I'd say that Hopeless Greed is roughly 1.5 to 2 times harder than normal Hopeless Pursuit, which means that this is the definitive hardest FNAF challenge ever as of recording this video. As of starting Hopeless Greed, I had rebeaten Hopeless Pursuit about 20 times, and I can confidently say it's a pretty big difference. I even went ahead and did Hopeless Pursuit is Dead, which takes inspiration from the Geometry Dash community and means that you did something 3 times in a row.
Coins.
Oh my god, what? What? HP is dead. Yo, no fucking way, dude. HP is dead. What, bro? And even after this, I would still consider Hopeless Greed to be harder than doing Hopeless Pursuit 3 times in a row. No one had even thought to attempt this until I started making this video. So I was going into completely uncharted territory, and I had to make my own strategy. So here's what I came up with. At the beginning of the night, coin farm your soul out. You're going to need 40 coins minimum to get on pace. From here on out, you're going to have to coin farm during every office cycle that isn't an hour change one. On Meebird cycles, you can get away with only doing 1 flip, but preferably you do 2 flips. For the rest of 12 AM, just play normally and farm a bit extra on the first Meebird cycle. Once you get to the first hour change, we're going to play things a little differently. Normally, we'd enter the cameras at 56 seconds, wind puppet, then look at the showtime before we get the ducks and vents. The problem with this strategy is that we aren't actually buying the plushie until roughly 105, which wastes any coins that we might get while waiting at the coin cap between 1 minute and 105. So instead, pull up the cameras and wind like it's a normal cycle, going into the ducks. Then return to Funtime Foxy's camera after the vents. Now, the moment the hour changes, see which plushie is in the hallway and immediately purchase it. This will ensure that we're at the coin cap of 70 coins for as little time as possible. Now, from this point forward, try to farm 4 coins using 2 flips on every camera cycle. When you're coin farming, make sure to pay really close attention to Scrap Baby, who is now one of the harder characters in Hopeless Greed. Sometimes she can look up on your farming flips and completely end your run without you even realizing it. However, once you reach the 126 cam cycle, we're going to perform a very important tech, the Rockstar Freddy skip. Earlier, we were calculating how many Faz coins you need to beat the night. Rockstar Freddy being permanent ate up 100 of those coins. But what if we were so fast that we could just skip him entirely? Well, if we pay Rockstar Freddy right as we pull up the cameras on the 26 office cycle, then go through the 41 cycle without paying him, you can pay him at the very start of the hour change office cycle, entirely skipping the payment in the 41 office cycle, saving 5 coins. The downside to this is that you need to be fast as hell in the cameras. One wrong move and you won't be fast enough for this skip. And we need to do this 4 times, along with maskless coin farming in every office cycle. This increases the speed of the gameplay by an insane margin, and makes some characters in particular extremely difficult. Let's talk about our runner-ups first. The Puppet is now one of the most annoying characters in the night, simply because winding the box takes so much time. Remember that masked characters will spawn really fast in the cameras because we're farming in office cycles, so having to spend so much time on winding the box forces us to be extremely fast everywhere else in the cameras. Because of this, every character that requires precise aim and mouse movement in the cameras is now much harder. The ducts feel a lot stricter, and Toy Freddy can lead to loads of time loss if you aren't insanely precise with his super small camera icons. But no character is nearly as downright insane as Rockstar Bonnie. Oh my god. As if Rockstar Bonnie didn't already get at us hard enough with the 554 back in Hopeless Pursuit, in Hopeless Greed, he is easily the most difficult character by a pretty wide margin. You see, characters that have kill timers in the cameras are always a problem in Hopeless Greed. The entire gameplay loop of HG involves speeding through the cameras as fast as possible in order to make up more time later in the office section so that you can farm coins. So any character that has a kill timer based on when you drop the cameras would be really bad in Hopeless Greed. Toy Freddy and Rockstar Bonnie both have these, but one is much worse than the other. We always know where Toy Freddy is going to be, and dealing with him doesn't take that much time, but Rockstar Bonnie could be in any of his 4 spawns, and if his guitar happens to spawn in Funtime Cove all the way at the end of the camera cycle, the speed in the cameras required to grab the guitar before his timer runs out is insane, especially if you're on a plushie cycle. Now normally we'd buy the plushies at the first 1 AM cycle, the second 3 AM cycle, and the third 5 AM cycle. But that's not going to cut it anymore since we need to end the night with 70 coins. If you're on pace, you should be able to buy the second plushie on the 211 cam cycle, then the third plushie around 411, which should give you enough time to farm up the 70 coins needed to complete the night. Now, when you look at these plushie times, you might be wondering, if we buy the second plushie at 211 and the third one at 411, how do we know who the second animatronic is so we don't die at 4 AM to the plushie? And that, my friend, is the funny part. You don't know. On top of Hopeless Greed skill-wise being damn near twice as hard as Hopeless Pursuit, you got a straight up 50-50 shot of just dying, because you have to guess which plushie is the second and which is the third. If you're able to double coin farm on every office cycle, you can sometimes buy the third plushie before 4 AM, removing any kind of RNG. But I've never been able to do this consistently. So on top of skill-wise being awful, Hopeless Greed now adds in the good old brutal RNG. If you manage to survive the second plushie, make sure you buy the death coin at 5 AM, as it only becomes buyable once the 5 AM visual changes appear. Don't get nervous and you will have beaten Hopeless Greed. Now, this might be verifier bias, but personally, just for me, jumping from Hopeless Pursuit to Hopeless Greed felt pretty similar to NDC to Hopeless Pursuit, in that it was that big of a jump in difficulty. And that might sound pretty crazy, but I'm serious, it really gave me a hard time. Despite being so much harder than HP, I had experience with coin farming mid-office cycle, so I was able to catch on to the Hopeless Greed cycle a lot faster once I learned Rockstar Freddy skips. And it wasn't too long before I was getting some 3 AM and 4 AM runs. Even still, I was facing similar walls to normal Hopeless Pursuit, and Hopeless Greed's biggest problem became very apparent very quickly. Hopeless Greed destroys your body when you play it. I'm gonna be real with you guys, the next video that I make will definitely not be a FNAF challenge. I'm dead serious when I say this. I'm likely developing arthritis from how fast you have to be in both your keyboard and mouse hand in Hopeless Greed, and I really just want to let my hands recover after this one. But for now, I was going to endure the pain until it was done. Despite this, I was still progressing normally. In fact, I was facing a pretty similar situation to my original Hopeless Pursuit grind. I had a week where I was home from college for spring break, and I figured that I could beat Hopeless Greed this week. Then I could finish up editing, then finally release this video. And all things considered, things were going decently well. I was getting more 4 AMs than I could count, and since 5 AM was the only hour without a Rockstar Freddy skip, I felt that once I broke the 5 AM barrier, I would finally have it in the bag. And I maintained a pretty positive look until March 12th, where I achieved the worst fail in Five Nights at Freddy's history. We have seen some really bad fails. Trust me, the Rockstar Bonnie fail, the 6-hour 420 fail, but none will ever be as bad as Hopeless Greed 559.6.
No! 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 What the fuck? Why aren't you on the f***ing cameras? Oh my god!
I'm gonna chalk it up to a legitimate curse at this point. I don't even know how many videos deep I'm into this streak of having a loss so close to the end, but already having a close fail in the same video wasn't enough. I came so unbearably close to being the first person in the world to complete the new Hardest FNAF challenge. As we discussed earlier, in Hopeless Greed, any character that has some sort of timer in the cameras is now significantly harder, and the puppet is one of these characters. I was so nervous from fluking so much time in this run that I forgot to wind the music box the whole way. If I had stayed on the box for, I kid you not, 0.2 more seconds, I would have beat Hopeless Greed right here, at the end of one of the cleanest games I have ever played. And I cannot put into words how devastating this fail was. For starters, let's talk about how much these 0.4 seconds cost me. It took me 8 days until I had another run that even looked like it had a prospect of winning. Every day that went by, I knew was another day that this already ridiculously delayed video was going to be delayed even further, and it destroyed me. I could not get that 0.4 second loss out of my head. For the first time that night, I actually had a dream about selling another Hopeless Greed run to some stupid bullshit. And at this point, I finally cracked. I don't have footage from this time period, as I was deleting all of the unsuccessful attempts that I had to save storage space, because my Hopeless Pursuit folder was literally terabytes in size, but I had finally gotten back to the point where I was just straight up raging out. I had been playing, watching, and editing this stupid game for 3 whole months, and I was so close to finally being done and having a break, and I was robbed again. I'd literally beaten it, so now I had to do all of that again? That 5:59 was the final test of willpower from UCN Deluxe. A few nights later, I had a major shift in mentality. It had already been 3 months of non-stop torture and nothing else, and I had finally had enough. Do you know how much I had seen in these last 3 months? You know what? Fine. Give me all you've got. Do your worst. I'll enjoy this. I'll enjoy being pushed past my breaking point over and over again, because you know what? It makes me strong. Every time that I do these stupid challenges day in and day out, it will always make me stronger, and I will always keep fighting no matter what. I knew that to truly make a statement in Honor Bones, it was time to go into uncharted territory and be the first person to complete the new Hardest FNAF challenge. When I started this channel, I was dying on 1020 mode in FNAF due to Toy Bonnie, and now here we are, about to face the new Hardest FNAF challenge. This is Hopeless Greed. As the time turned to 3 AM, I realized that I got the plushie 50-50 wrong, but this time I wasn't going to let RNG determine whether or not I win. It was time to go for all 3 plushies before 4 AM. With 7 seconds remaining in the night, the goal of max coins met and the death coin bought, I had a tough decision to make. I could either wait in the office and hope that I don't light a puppet like last time, or just say screw it and go in the cameras. With how much I was shaking, going in the cameras could be risky. I had to end the night on Funtime Foxy's camera or else I would die at 6 AM. For just these last 5 seconds, I had to have perfect aim.
Oh my god. Oh. Holy fuck. Yes! Oh my god. Oh my god. I finally beat HG. Holy shit!
Oh. Holy oh my god. Let me make sure and look back. That was I don't even believe it right now. I've had 2 559s. I don't even believe it's real yet until I rewatch the recording and make sure it's fucking real. I don't even believe it's real. Holy shit, dude. You know how much I've put off to do this? You know how much fucking schoolwork I have built up right now? Oh my god. Holy shit, dude. Please, God, let there be nothing wrong with this recording. Please, 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 please let this recording be fucking perfect. I really don't want to have to do this again. And with that, I was finally finished with Hopeless Pursuit and Hopeless Greed. I had been the first to complete the new hardest FNAF challenge in the entire world. If you've watched this far into the video, this has been quite the journey. I've spent over 3 months on this project total, and your viewership truly means the world to me. I also want to inform everyone here that my Discord server no longer exists. There was a lot of pressing issues with the server and Discord as a whole for me, and it was beginning to get too big for me to handle and moderate to the new standard that I wanted for it. However, if you'd still like to send me fan art like this gorgeous piece by Meleg on Insta, you can DM my Instagram account at TheBones5, and I'll feature it in upcoming videos during the outros. Speaking of absolutely gorgeous artwork pieces, I'd like to thank all of the wonderful animators that worked with me during this project. Dzyntara made the intro to HP scene, and you can find her on Tumblr and Discord as Dzyntara. HazelTheBoxhead made the skeleton bones fight scene, and you can find her on Twitter as HazelTheBoxhead or on Discord as The Real Boxhead. Norhkuna did all of the sound design for all of the scenes, and you can find her on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Blue Sky as Norhkuna. Cressauri did the thumbnail and teaser art, and you can find them on Instagram as Cressauri. EirwenZone did the shot of Bones and Cassidy right before the Hopeless Pursuit montage, and you can find them as EirwenZone on YouTube and Blue Sky. pigeonax and OceanLeafeon both did the Hopeless Pursuit ending scene. You can find pigeonax on YouTube and OceanLeafeon on Instagram and Twitter. Siskin art did the scene right after the skeleton bones transformation, and you can find them as Siskin art on Blue Sky and Twitch. And Eighteas did the skeleton bones transformation, and you can find them as Eighteas on Blue Sky. Again, massive thank you to all of these animators for helping me make this video the best it can possibly be. I'd also like to thank Brennenspeal for making the new design for the skeleton bones. You can find him as Brennenspeal on Instagram, and read his own original comic titled Alter Universe at macemania.com, which I personally am a big fan of. But for this outro, I'd like to dedicate it to Bones. The reason that I was able to get this far and not only beat Hopeless Pursuit, but also verify Hopeless Greed. Don't worry, in all of the videos after this, I'll feature fan art in the outro like normal, but here, I think this is more appropriate. As for future projects, don't worry. FNAF isn't going anywhere on this channel. I still have so much to do, and despite not really having anything harder than Hopeless Greed, I'm sure I could make something up that's at least on par with it. Generally, there are 5 pillars that I've identified as games that have super hard max modes that you can work up to, and I will definitely get around to all of them at some point, as we've only conquered 1 so far. I do want to throw in some non-FNAF content a bit more, 1 to give my body a break, and 2, you guys seem to really enjoy the last non-FNAF video. Overall, Hopeless Pursuit, Hopeless Greed, and the life events that have happened to me during the process of making this video have put me through more mental struggle than I've ever really faced before. And though Hopeless Pursuit and Greed completely broke me mentally on multiple occasions, in the end, it did help me. So thank you, Hopeless Pursuit, for making me a stronger person. And thank you all for watching this video. For Bones.